Welcome to another episode of the Carrytrainer Higher Line podcast. Today's guest, coming to us from Las Vegas, we have got Mr. Robert Drysdale, world champion jiu-jitsu practitioner, called by some as America's jiu-jitsu hero. This episode is going to blow your mind in some ways, and we are going to open up all kinds of topics that I didn't even think we were going to talk about. Dig in to the Higher Line podcast, this time with Mr. Robert Drysdale. Let's go. Welcome to another episode of the Carrytrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey all, welcome to yet another episode of the Carrytrainer Higher Line podcast. Looking up the gentleman that we're talking today, one of the first things I found online was America's Jiu-Jitsu hero. That's got to be pretty crazy to have people call you America's Jiu-Jitsu hero. Got Mr. Rob Drysdale. So you are at one point, world champion, ADCC champion. You've won some other stuff too. Kind of a world-renowned grappler. You founded a gym, training gym, right?
International team Zenith. We have like close to 100 schools worldwide.
That's quite a few.
Yeah, I stay busy, man. I was fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, and I happened to absolutely love what I was doing. So it didn't feel like a job. It never felt like a job. Still doesn't. Well, sometimes it does, I guess.
That's fun. You came into my I guess vision from my coach Dan Hart. He was talking about you. I know he's visited, done some training with you at your home gym in the past, and yeah, you've written some books. Kind of want to talk about that. And interesting, you have a degree in history. You're a history buff.
When I was a child, I always liked books. I leaned towards academics as a child. I was not a great athlete. I liked combat. I liked, He-Man and G.I. Joe and Thundercats, and I was a child in the 80s. So the same stuff every child in the 80s liked. Yes, pretty much. But
Wait, that's not actually how it goes.
I
It goes.
didn't
Do you remember the theme song?
Thundercats.
Yeah, of course. But you got to do it
I
for
remember
real.
the
We're
theme
going to do
song.
it later.
Oh man, no, maybe later. But I fell in love with jiu-jitsu when I was 16, but I thought I'd be, an archaeologist or something like that. That's kind of what I had in mind as a child. And I found jiu-jitsu when I was 16 and I was hooked. And when I retired, I decided to go back to my first love, I guess.
Which was studying about the world.
History, archaeology, humanities in general. I used to geek out on encyclopedias as a child. I'm always reading something. I was never not reading something that was in, history or psychology or philosophy related. It's been a passion of mine since I was, teenager, I guess, and I enjoy it. So I had the opportunity to put my two greatest passions together. I felt that there were books published already, in the history of jiu-jitsu, but I felt like I could do something different. So I decided to do a documentary. The documentary I was meant to be an article about making a documentary. The article turned into a book during lockdown, and I discovered that I love to write. I absolutely love the process of creating. I say this all the time. That's when I'm happiest is when I'm writing, reading and writing. I really, really enjoy it. So I wrote a second one. I got two others coming out before the end of the year, hopefully. And I think that's what I'll do, until the day I die is teach jujitsu and write books.
Your first book is Opening Close Guard, and that's the one that the documentary is also based on.
Well, it's the first book is a story of me getting involved. So the first quarter of the book is like just like how I got involved, and I think it's a pretty cool story. And it's expanded into the production itself and the interviews and the discoveries and the things that changed along the way because I started this project like any other jiu-jitsu practitioner, whatever the average BJJ practitioner knows about BJJ history, that's what I knew in 2017 when I started all this, right? But it was a process of discovery and learning how to read, really. I think that was the biggest. I was a history major, so I thought I knew how to read, but you don't like you learn reading is a skill. It's like jujitsu, man. You get better at it. I think I was illiterate before this, like, because like I sometimes I read some of the things I used to write, and I'm like, man, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like I'm completely off. So it was a process of discovery of learning how to read, really, like interpret information clearly, ridding myself of my biases. We all have our biases, and that's been an uphill battle, man. Because just getting the Maeda like episode out of my head has been an uphill battle. Because Maeda was like Maeda this, Maeda that, and like looking back now, I go, man, what did this guy do? He barely belongs in the story, but everyone's obsessed with him for some odd reason. So
So
it's just
for some of our
little things like
listeners
that.
that
Yeah.
some of our listeners are not jujitsu buffs, you don't need to go deep in the weeds, but who is it you're talking about?
So the story goes, the short version of the story, the official narrative, right, is, Kodo Khan Blackwood, Judo Blackwood from Japan, travels the world, settles in the Brazilian Amazon, begins to teach class. One of his students is a man called Carlos Gracie, who would on to teach his siblings, one of them, probably the most famous one, Helio Gracie, who was the father of Hoist Gracie, who was the first UFC champion, right? So when Hoist won the UFC in 93, everyone is asking these guys, where did you guys come from? You guys are Brazilian. Your father's from the Amazon, but you're wearing a Japanese gi and you're calling it jiu-jitsu, but it looks like judo to me. And there was like this gap in this story that people couldn't figure out. And the first man to tell the story was this man called Rorion Gracie, who is the founder of the UFC. He was the mind behind, not the only mind, right? There's Art Davie and John Malone, but as well. But Rorion was like, the largely the mind behind the original UFC. And he told the story as he knew it. But again, he wasn't an eyewitness and he's not a historian either. So he just repeated what his father told him. And, there's a lot of gaps in the story. And for decades, really, everyone just believed him for what he said. And what he said was gospel truth. And it wasn't until the Brazilian National Library digitized their files in 2012 that people start digging and like, oh, it turns out that there's a lot more people involved in this story. It's not at what we thought it was. And it turns out that it's far more interesting. It doesn't discredit anyone. I think a lot of people, assume that the story discredits, this person or that person or Brazilians in general. And I don't think it does. I think it's enriched by the facts. I think history should be objective. I'm not one of those. I'm not an advocate of relativism. I think it's just a lazy way of reading history. I think you can at least attempt to be objective. If we don't use the word truth, then we should at least agree that we should pursue the truth as best we can. Just like we may not be able to achieve perfection as grapplers or as individuals, as parents, it doesn't mean we shouldn't strive towards perfection. And I look at history the same way. We should strive towards objectivity, free of politics. And then that's been very difficult because, and I don't know if it's the internet that's done that or it's always been that way, but people are highly politicized. Like everything is black or white. You're either a
Mm.
liberal or a Republican. There's no in between. So if I say something that's like critical of liberals, they immediately assume I'm a Republican and vice versa. Like there's no
I,
nuance.
I
That's
get
such an
that shit
odd
all the
feature.
time.
It's crazy to me. And so you're either an anti-Gracie or a pro-Gracie. There's no in between. Like, are there any such thing as reading the facts objectively, like free of politics? But I think the political thing is so ingrained in the American psyche. I think people have a hard time viewing the world free of politics.
Do you think it's just an American thing? You don't think people
I
do that
and when I
elsewhere?
say the reason I say it's an American thing, it's because the world follows our lead. What we
Mm,
do, the world follows a few years behind. Like
sure.
Brazil is 10 years behind the US. Like they copy us. We own Hollywood, man. We are the cultural reference to the world. Like how many Brazilian artists you know? Like probably none. Like how many American artists do Brazilians know? They could probably name 30 off the top of their head. The
Sure.
cultural dominance is very, very real. And I think that means people are borrowing good and bad things.
Mm.
So I think it's I'll give an example. When I was a child in Brazil, because I was
Yeah.
raised in Brazil. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about
Um,
that a little bit because a lot of people don't know that about you. So you were born in the U.S.
Correct. I was born in Utah, and my father was a Mormon missionary. He spoke Portuguese fluently. My mother was a swimmer, competitive, high-level swimmer on a scholarship at BYU, and my mom was Brazilian. So the only guy who spoke Portuguese on campus was my father. They met on campus. I was born on campus. I moved back to, I mean, my mom wanted to move back to Brazil when I was 5. So I was raised in Brazil from 5 to 17. And And I moved to Brazil in 86. So it was right after the end of the dictatorship. The dictatorship ended, it was from 64 to 85. So it was a period of democratization. So there were hundreds of political parties. So I was raised in an environment with hundreds of political parties. And the press
Hmm.
was, I admit, I mean, in theory, at least they were neutral. There was no such thing as a right wing press or left wing press. You know, that's a very, when I moved to the United States in 99 to go to college, I came back to the US right after high school in Brazil. It was such an odd thing to me that there was a liberal press and a conservative press, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. And I still can't, because it's such an odd thing to me. Because basically, what you're telling me as a journalist that you're sacrificing journalistic objectivity prior to knowing the facts. And I have a very hard time digest that. It's fine if you have your personal opinions, but as a journalist, you should try to write things as they are, not as you prefer to see them. You shouldn't select facts. You know, if anything, you should be critical of your own party if you're serious about helping it. And when I see this polarization, I see the world copying the US because that didn't exist in Brazil when I was a child. When I
Hmm.
go back to Brazil, it's become like that. Now we have a right wing press in Brazil, which is something that didn't exist. Right.
Hmm.
So I think that the tendency, and I think that I think the internet has helped because the internet, they're echo chambers, right? So they push one side to one extreme and they push the other extreme. You're with two sides that don't communicate at all. They're speaking completely different languages. And I think that people internalize that more than they realize. And I think in some ways, my book fall into this paradigm of people thinking that you must be a pro Gracie or an anti Gracie. There's nothing in between. And that's been my biggest struggle is trying to try to stay outside of that and just attempt to be as objective as I can as a writer,
It's
which is not easy to
it's
do.
interesting. It's interesting. I didn't mean to talk over you, Rob. It's interesting. You see this even like with buddies. You and I are hanging out, we're close friends, and you have a viewpoint that maybe I don't totally agree with. Could be
Sure.
political, could be religious, it could be about the football team you like, whatever. You know, usually guys, if it's sports, you can rib each other about it, but it could be something that has an emotional connection. And sometimes I've caught myself, not so much in my older years, but in my younger years, just saying like, yeah, and acting agreeable to not create friction with a friend or a
Yeah.
family member,
Yeah.
and then kind of being like, dang, I didn't know they felt that way about this thing. And not like, not something crazy like they want to eat children's heads or something, but just
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't agree with. And I think it's kind of like that. Like, heck, there's this thing that I'm super emotional about, and you look at it in a different way, thus we can't be friends. I'll have people, somebody shared something the other day online, and I try to play devil's advocate. I've been called clinical before by people because I can just like I'll just slice it apart. What do I see? Like, let's put it on some
Yeah.
slides and shove it
Yeah.
under a microscope. Good, bad, right, or wrong. Like, I could look at the Biden administration and say, here's some really good stuff that
Yeah.
people in this presidential cabinet did that was good. And then I can also say, here's some horrible shit that Reagan or Trump or whoever did.
Yeah.
Whatever. I've had
I'm
people
with you.
say to
Yeah.
me, because I commented, you must be liberal. Because I question something or
Yeah.
even like pose a question, now I must be like, running down the street with a Black Lives Matter flag, breaking
Yeah.
windows or something. Like take it easy. And I
And
shouldn't also make a point that just because somebody has black eyes matter doesn't mean they're breaking
no,
windows.
Mike, I'm with you, and I strongly believe that people like me and you are the majority, but we're not represented because clearly we haven't chosen a side. So if you have like any kind of neutral position, and not even neutral, it's just like you said, let's put it under the microscope and analyze the facts as they are. Now we may disagree on moral grounds. That's perfectly
Hmm.
possible. We have a different moral matrix. That's perfectly possible. But I don't think that should stop us from communicating. I don't think that means I'm your enemy because we disagree. I think if you got reasonable people on both sides to discuss, you would agree. I'll give an example. Just going back to jiu-jitsu history, like the guy Pedro Valente is probably the guy who's most representative of the researchers out there of Helio Gracie, right? I Pedro probably agreeing about 99.9% of everything we say. There's like little disagreements here and there, but it's because if you talk your disagreements out, I think people reach a place of balance. The problem is when there's no communication, the communication ends because they're speaking different languages because they're so polarized. And
Mm.
the polarization begins, like you said, your friend, you disagree with your friend. You're like, oh, and all of a sudden you don't like them as much. Like my best friends are the ones who disagree with me. I love being called on my bullshit. If someone spots me talking, like, please point me out. Like, I don't mind. I'm never offended. I think you help me. It'd be like you rolling with me in jiu-jitsu and correcting me. Like, why would I be upset? I'm thankful if you correct me. Like you pointed something out I'm wrong about. I may not agree with your correction, sure, but I should be able, willing to listen. And I think that's where a lot of these discussions get lost. They become so confrontational and polarized. It's just this lack of people's ability to listen to what the other side is saying. And then, things get lost and turns into warfare very quickly.
It, I think I'd push back a little bit on the idea that most people objectively look at things. I was involved in politics for years, and I would show up to a meeting or a event, and people would come up to me. I was sort of a big deal in the community for a little while in the political spectrum. And they would start to tell me about something. Oh, that Rob guy, do you know what he's doing? And I'd try to listen, and I'd realize real quick it was just some nonsensical frickin', Rob's trying to get this guy to be put into a congressional seat because he wants to make, kids have to eat
Yeah,
toxic food from dumpsters. And it's like, whoa, time
yeah,
out. And
yeah,
and like, where'd you hear that? Where'd you see this? Where did you get that information? Well, Carol from over at the such and such office heard it from this guy, heard it from that guy. And I have a hard time finding people. My group of people, I think, are pretty good, but I have a hard time, like people that are very close to me that I love, family, sometimes friends. Not a lot of like people that I consider close friends or peers, but I'll ask, and I definitely don't feel I'm special, but I just really want to know the truth. Something you and I talked about on the phone the other day, and like whatever it is, man, just tell me the truth. Like, does my breath bad? If you love me, tell me my breath's bad so I could
yeah,
get a
yeah.
mint, you know?
Yeah, that's a good friend. But people, and I think it'd be difficult to point the origin of any of this, but I think it starts with like the primacy of feelings over reality. I think that's a good
Mm.
starting place because once you put your feelings above reality, you can start saying, "Oh, you are rude because you said I have bad breath." Like, no, bro, I'm
Uh,
helping you. You know?
so
But I
delivery
think
delivery could be a
yeah.
thing. Delivery, if I was like, hey
Oh,
man, you're a dirt
sure.
bag and your breath smells like a homeless guy versus,
No,
hey bro, yeah, grab a mint because your breath kind of stinks.
delivery, sure, but not at the cost of sacrificing the truth. Like you can package the truth as best you can, which is something perhaps I haven't done a great, job at when it comes to the history of jiu-jitsu. Maybe I could have packaged it better. I try
Talk to
to
me
be
about
neutral.
that.
Well, it's difficult. Part of the process. I did this podcast in Brazil, and they were pretty popular. We got a lot of traction and somewhat controversial because people that's one of the reasons I called you before. Like, man, like I am paranoid about these edits because I said many compliments about X, Y, and Z, many positive things, and people were editing out the one thing I said. It wasn't even negative. I said something to the keen of the equivalent of saying, I can't remember exactly what I said, but the Helio Grace was not the best fighter of his generation, which is true, right? But it came across in a way where it sounded like I was saying like he was some piece of shit, horrible fighter. He didn't know what he was doing. Like that's not what I said, but it almost got framed that way because that's what most people saw, right? So
Mm.
people were like coming after me saying like, "How dare you disrespect?" I'm like, "Well, if I say Bruce Lee was not a great fighter, I'm not. I mean, why would you be offended? Like, it's the truth. Like, I never fought anyone. Like, I'm just speaking facts here, people. But people get
Time
very,
out.
very upset.
Time out. Bruce Lee
Yeah.
would beat your ass and three dudes just like you. You wouldn't even stand
Bro,
a chance, homie. He'd freaking
Bruce Lee.
1 inch punch your guts through the back of your head.
I have 14-year-old kids that would beat Bruce Lee in a fight, bro. Like, and I don't know this fun. Like, it's. And the last time I got in an argument with someone about this, is like, dude, if Bruce Lee was a great fighter, then Tom Cruise is a great fighter pilot. Like, it's you can. I'm sure
There's
Tom
my
Cruise.
there's my soundbite. I'm gonna piss every kung fu.
Oh, bro, that was the thing I said that upset the most people more than anything else I said. I didn't realize there was still a legion of even after the UFC. I think it is remarkable that people are still buying so much of this crap. I'm like, dude, are you serious, man? Before the UFC, you had an excuse. We didn't know. After the UFC, it's the laboratory, man. It's empirical. It's there. You cannot argue with the facts. If the blast worked, if the trapping system worked, why don't we see it in the UFC? It's unbelievable.
because
But there, and there,
because there's rules, man, and in the street there is no rules.
and that's
That's
the other
the
thing.
pushback, right?
But it's such a great hiding place. It's the gap kind of argument. The idea that you can eye poke someone. If Islam Makhachev is shooting a double leg on one of these self-defense artists, guys that think they can poke my eye when the fight, you believe you can poke Islam Makhachev as he shoots a double leg on you? You're out of your mind. Like we wouldn't even come near him. Like by the time you even thought about doing, you'd be on the ground getting punched in the head.
I
It's
think
just it's
if we were
delusion.
gonna have like a real comparison, it would have to be like an Olympic level martial artist, right? Fighting or trying to poke that guy. It couldn't just be like some dime
Oh,
store
you
eye
could poke
poker.
him with a jab like John Jones did. Like that's a
Okay.
legitimate eye poke. That's a jab with your hands open. It's a jab. Okay, fair. I accept that. But a lot of these things that these guys are teaching, and this is a huge flaw. I have a book about this that I'm working on. It's called The Problem with Martial Arts. And I argue that a lot of it is just con artistry disguised as wisdom. Because the problem with martial arts is that none of them are empirical. And that includes Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, that includes judo, that includes
When you
boxing.
say empirical, please define that.
They're based on the personal preferences and the speculation of its founders.
Got it.
There's no lab. The lab was invented in '93. Before that, there were no labs. So you get any martial art, and like some martial arts come close to the reality of combat, in my opinion. Combat sambo is one, kudo is the other. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in the '80s did. It changed in the '90s, right? In the '80s, it was close to the reality of combat. These guys trained with slaps, right? These guys did striking as part of their training was learning how to take someone down when someone was punching them. That was part of jiu-jitsu. Today, that's not jiu-jitsu, but back in the '80s, it was. '70s and '80s, it was. But the problem is that all these systems, they're the product of the speculation of the founders. I think this would work. This is what I think would happen in a fight. This is what I like. So people naturally lean towards their personal preferences because that's what they know. So if you're good at takedowns, you create a martial art that's to emphasizes takedowns is the most important thing. If you're good at knees and elbows, you create a martial art that emphasizes, guess what you happen to be good at. That's just common sense. But it's all based on personal preferences and opinions, speculation. It's not empirical. There was no way to test these martial arts in a real fight until the UFC. Now, I know someone's going to say, oh, the UFC is not a real fight because it has rounds. Sure. Or it has a referee in there. Sure. But it's still as real as it gets. And I love that slogan so much because the UFC or MMA, for that matter, is the closest we have ever gotten to a real fight free of guns and more than one opponent. In a duo format, in a duo homem contra homem, macho contra macho, you have a one versus one format. The MMA is the closest thing to true combat we have ever seen. Now, you can say that, oh, in a real fight, I would do this, I'll bite you, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, I still can't see that guy. How do you train that to begin with? How are you going to practice biting someone? Like, where does the
Well,
practice come from?
the
Like,
funny thing is you and I both know, and you know much more than I do, but like even somebody biting you, if they're taking elbows to their forehead or their jaw, or you're doing a rear naked choke on them and they're trying to scratch at your face, they're
it's
going to go to
laughable.
sleep in
It's
seconds
laughable.
anyway. So yeah,
And
yeah.
look, I on my Instagram feed are the many things that show up. One of them is like street fights because I'm interested. I'm like, I like to watch what a real street fight looks like. I never see eye gouging and biting. I see women hair pulling, but typically the men you see elbow, knees, right hand, left hook, single leg, body lock, rear naked choke, occasionally a triangle. Like you see the same stuff you see in the UFC, basically,
Hmm.
right? It's not so different. And I am very, very skeptic that people that don't have competitive experience, right? So you're just training this in the gym in a controlled environment without actual randori, without actual fighting, like live sparring. And how do you know? How do you develop the skills for something you're not training for? Like a boxer
Mm.
fires that jab a million times for him to perfect it to the point where he can land it on another fighter, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, I
got the
can't
skill
imagine
to defend it.
how many times do you think Jordan Burroughs shot that double leg takedown in his life, right? For him to get to the level where he is. And it's the same with every martial artist that is qualified. But some of these systems they practice with no resistance and they're convinced that they can win in a fight because they know the move when the guy's not fighting back. And you can't lie.
Yeah.
How are you going to spar with eye gouging? I don't know how you practice that. How do you practice biting? Like a boxer, you can practice the jab by hitting the bag. How do you
When I
practice
practice
biting?
biting, I tape raw pork
Yeah,
chops
yeah,
down my arm, and I said, "Go."
yeah,
I have a great story. I was a tough kid. I like to scrap. I did some martial arts, taekwondo, and those types of martial arts as a kid, and I was probably 18 working with this dude that was probably your age at the time, little fire plug, very muscular. He was an infantryman in the army, super fit, and so he's old enough to be my dad, and he was like a high school wrestling champ that then never wrestled beyond high school. He went to the army and then was working in construction. And so we're talking about it, and one day, and after work, uh, we were just going to play around a little bit in the yard, and I'm like, I'm going to beat this old man's ass. And he
yeah.
slammed me so hard with a double leg that I thought I was concussed. My head bounced off the hard, just in some
Yeah.
grass, but grass has got dirt underneath it. So I got up and dusted it off, and I ran at him, and he stuffed me face first like a
Yeah.
cartoon, and I slid, like 3 feet with him stuffing me. So this went on for about 4 minutes until I was like out of breath, and I had grass stains and like blood all over me. And we talked about it. He's like, dude, literally for like 8 years of my life, all I did was what I just did to you. Like I practiced a double leg, like you just said, 87 million times. And like I've always told people after that, like you jokingly said a 14-year-old could have beat up Bruce Lee. Like a dude that's done that. At our gym, we've got a guy, his name's Derek, freaking badass. He wins stuff at Pans and Worlds all the time. He was a great wrestler, and you'll see him go, and he's going against 50-year-old dude or whatever in his division of IBJJF, and he freaking shoots on these guys like he's 19 years old, and he's mid 50s now because he just
Um,
did it so many times.
it's the nervous system. It's not your consciousness. It's a lot of times, a lot of martial artists in general, they have a hard time understanding. And it's I associate this myth with the Eastern martial arts. You don't have this problem with boxing and wrestling. The idea that you dissociate athletic ability from technique is something that Eastern martial arts suffer from. You don't have this problem in boxers. No wrestler would say that being strong is bad. No boxer, like a boxing coach sees a kid with power in his hands. Customato finds a Mike Tyson, is like, I like you because you're strong.
Right, right, right,
Where
right.
like
Your punches are
in
gonna
martial
hurt.
arts, like it's pure technique. The technique is going to conquer the power, or how they say like this. It's like there's no dissociation. You're separating the wheel from the tire. They work together. Athletic ability is intelligent use. A technique is intelligent use of your athletic ability. That's how I describe it. We have a lot of these myths, and people get these things in their head because if the technique is separate from the athletic ability, I can be fat and slow and still be an expert. You understand? You don't have to work out. So now you get to hide behind their black belt. You can do these goofy moves in front of a mirror, right? And you can, have all these clients that are terrified of being assaulted, and you can convince them that you're teaching them how to fight by teaching all these gimmicks, things that we will know for a fact don't work. That these guys are not able to defend themselves. It's practically a form of charlatanism, and martial arts industry is rampant with that. And I see it, and like I feel like the right thing is to call these people out as the frauds that they are. Like you don't know what you're talking about, man. You don't even know where to begin. And I see these guys describe this ritual fighting. Like that's how this Aikido guy, yeah, he's trying to like talk this other guy, I think a YouTube video, and he's describing MMA as ritual fighting. It's not real fighting. Oh, as opposed to what you're doing. You're telling me that you're drilling with the guy letting you do moves is more realistic, and
So
it's gonna
time out one
prepare
second,
you.
because
Yeah.
are you suggesting Aikido's not a real martial art?
I don't even know what a real martial art is, man. Like it depends on what you want to call a martial art. I am saying that there's no way you can grab the wrist of a grown man and throw him on the floor like that, unless he's like led than
So
you. There's no way you can do that. If it did work, we'd see it in the UFC. It's that simple.
right. Well, I have a little speech in our classes, so we teach firearm stuff, which to
Yeah,
me is a martial art, right? It's instead of
sure.
a strike, it's a bullet that can be used at distance. And martial means warlike. So
Sure.
would somebody go to war with this thing? And which is in this case two humans,
Yeah.
like you said. How'd you say it in Portuguese?
Homem contra homem. Or
You can't
randori
say
in judo. Judo is a randori.
Randori.
Yeah, like a
Because
dual format. Yeah.
I'll hear guys. So I'm not a war fighter. I've never even like a cop that's been in one gunfight they might base a whole career of education on like one experience. And then you'll hear them teach and they say the way I do this or the way I do that. And I always think like, really, how many times like have you reloaded a pistol behind a car in a parking lot and you're explaining it like the way I do this, maybe like the way I would see it best done in said scenario, but it becomes this adopted practice and then people recite it. Well, Gunmaster Rob or Mick or whoever said it this way. So like
Yeah.
this is the best practice. And now there's this kind of evolution in my space where people are looking at it. The term has become um, performance shooting or hard skills. So like hard skills for you would be a double leg takedown or staying in mount or something like that. Like, do
Yeah.
you like have these basic fundamentals? And guys are really like stripping it down to like just the basic essence of the thing, like a good boxer or grappler should. And I think the internet's been good for that because you can start to like call bullshit.
Yeah. Well, that's what the internet is. That's why to me it's so mind-boggling that after you have seen the internet, like there's still people who believe this crap. Like and I don't want to be offensive. Look, I don't want to offend anyone. I'm not trying to pick a fight here. I'm trying to help you, right? I'm trying to help you. I'm telling you the truth because it kills me that people are getting like robbed out of their money, hard-earned money, that they walking around with this false sense of confidence, thinking they know something they don't. All right. Look, it'd be like you mentioned the gun example. I think that if you practice at a range or in sport format, I think you can definitely become more familiar with guns and that's experience and that counts. But if you're a war veteran, there's a different story. There's something like I mean, you can ask any war veterans. It's not the same. Training is one thing, and when someone's actually trying, I mean, in a fight, trying to knock your head off in the war zone, trying to kill you, it's a different level of experience. There's a gap there between theory and practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
not so easy to bridge. Like it's not the same thing. I've never been in a gunfight. I've never been to war. But I imagine I'd be very, very nervous. I imagine I'd be very
Sure.
confused. I imagine any veteran will be much more, even if I were a better shot than them, I imagine he'd be much more efficient in the battlefield than me because he's been in 50 times he's been in that scenario and I've never been in one. So the sparring part, the live action, the practice, what the boxers do, what the wrestlers do, what jujitsu practitioners do, what judokas do, like you can't replace that. And that's and that comes with the degree of learning how to control your anger. Like I'll give you another example of why like some of these guys get really confused about what what a martial art ought to be is they want to train for self-defense purposes. I'm like, okay, fine with that. I don't want to compete. I don't care for medals. I'm like, okay, I understand you don't care for medals, but you should still compete. They go like, well, why do I have to compete? Like, you don't have to. But what competition will do is teach you how to control your nerves. Now, if you can't control your nerves with padded mats, a referee, a paramedic, and all the safety environments and rules protecting you, what makes you think you can control your nerves when someone attacks you in front of your wife? You think you'll be more prepared or less prepared than someone who's used to competition.
Mm.
Competition is baby step towards a real situation. It is
Mm-hmm.
a mid level. It's like it's prepping you for the real thing. So learning how to think strategically, because in a real situation, the circumstances are unknown. You don't even know how many people you're fighting. You have to learn how to not only master your emotions, you have to think and adapt very, very quickly to very quickly changing circumstances. And if you don't have that and you're confused and you're in that blur where you have no idea what's happened, you're going to make the wrong decision. Now, competition is not the same as a real fight, but it teaches you how to think quickly because if you think slowly, you're going to lose. For you to win, you have to be in control of the situation and think and adapt quickly to the circumstances, which are not the same as a street fight. But at least it teaches you how to control the immersion to get rid of the blur. Because my experience, most people in real situations are the first few times they compete, it's a blur. They'll tell you that. They coach, I have no idea if the time went by. I have no idea what the score was. They don't even know if they won or lost. They're completely lost. They're just going. They're just going on instinct because there's so much anxiety in them, right? And I strongly believe that one of the biggest benefits of martial arts is that competitive aspect that teaches you how to breathe and relax and prepare for the situation, calm yourself down in the heat of battle and make the right call. And I don't think you can prepare yourself for that without a lot of live action.
We've got a little saying that we use. My buddy Z, who's actually a black belt through Zenith, we say exposure equals composure.
Yeah.
Exposure equals composure. But the caveat, and I'm not telling this to you, but the people listening, you've got to expose yourself with the correct stuff. Like if I show up to your class every night and I'm bullshitting with all the guys instead of drilling, or I'm being lazy with how I'm drilling the technique, it isn't going to work when I need it. So like we've got to be super specific in the endeavor of learning. Otherwise, we're
Yeah.
just exposing ourselves to a bunch of crap.
No, and that's where the skepticism comes in. Like, you don't believe it just because you like it, just because it looks good, just because maybe it appeals to your emotion. I can imagine, man, like it'd be hard if someone walked into me tomorrow and said, "Hey, man, we got this new ground-oriented martial art. It's way better than Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and like everything you learned is like 90% of it wouldn't work in a fight." And that kind of break my heart, you know. Even though that's kind of where jiu-jitsu is today anyway, but that's a different story. That's a whole nother podcast. But
Go
yeah, go ahead.
go back a second. So what is a good martial art? Like if somebody, so in my training, this is my thought. Why am I out here shooting guns? And like in the firearm side, it's because I want to protect myself. So when I'm training, anything I should be doing should be preparation for violence. And now fun is completely separate. Go shoot for fun, that's fine. But if I'm training for violence, does this thing support
Yeah.
winning or not? So like what martial arts?
I don't even like to your point, martial, Mars, God of War. Like that's it's we call it martial arts, but you're right. A gun is far closer to a martial art than jujitsu is. It's just we're using the wrong word to describe something. We just got used to calling it a martial art. I'm going to go back to answer your question. I'm going to go back to a man called Jigoro Kano, who is the founder of judo. He's also pretty much the father of martial arts as we've come to understand the term today. So this idea of
Hmm,
like teaching children how to defend themselves and ranks and competition,
like
basically karate,
codified.
judo, all any martial art as we understand the hand-to-hand combat systems. Jiro Kano is the father of all that because this guy in the end of the 19th century in Japan, he basically understood that if these techniques are going to survive, right? Because remember, Japan is modernizing, gunpowder exists. Why would you learn how to punch and armbar someone if you just get a gun? It made no sense. The argument is a perfect argument. You cannot beat a gun with jiu-jitsu skills. There are no skills. Unless, I mean, if I'm really close, I could probably unarm most people, but the guy's like 4 feet away, I'd be dead. Like I'm not going to move fast enough to take the gun away from him. The only way this guy, I'm like, I can possibly take this gun up if I'm like clinched with him already, right? So a gun nullifies all your skills, and this was understood in the 19th century. So what is the purpose of a martial art? It's a perfectly valid question because everyone practices them. So what is this for? Look, self defense is a weak argument in my opinion. I think it's an aspect of it. It's an aspect of the answer, but it's not enough because a gun or a knife for that matter are a much better form of self-defense than jiu-jitsu ever will be, or any other martial art for that matter. Well, Jigoro Kano understood this, and he saw something else in martial arts. He saw it as a means to improve on the individual intellectually, morally, and physically. Right? This is I just mentioned the title of one of Herbert Spencer's book. Right? Education should be moral, physical, and intellectual, because they did it. You know, Herbert Spencer's not separating this. Herbert Spencer is Jigoro Kano's biggest influence. Very interesting guy. And he goes along and says, "Look, if martial arts are to survive, we have to make this into a school for life. This has got to be education. This is like he's envisioned it as a part of a Japanese school curriculums. Like he saw it as like you have chemistry and you have physics and you have mathematics, you have judo. That's how he envisioned it. And I think he's on the right track. I think that the purpose of a martial art is self-defense is a side effect. Under some circumstances, it can help, but it makes less and less sense the more efficient the law is, the more efficient cops and security are, and the more guns are out there, especially in America. Everyone owns a gun. Like, why? I mean, jujitsu is not going to help you in a gunfight. So, but as a form of education, I think that you were spot on. I think there's a lot of life lessons to be learned on the mats, a lot about yourself. I believe the
Sure.
growth is indeed intellectual, moral, and physical. And I don't think the values that nurture a man or a woman in terms of their intellect, their morals, and their physique are that different. I think a lot of these values aligned, and they should be working together. And a martial art does that, or could potentially do that, right? But you know, martial arts often get turned into show business, and when they get turned into show business, that comes with a whole new set of metrics and values that are at odds with the values of a martial art, as Jigoro Kano envisioned it. So, this is kind of where Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is today. We're living this, we don't even know what we are. We don't know what the purpose is. We're just running with the money. It's become a money grab. That's what it is at this point. It's it's less and less of an educational practice. There's conflict of values, right? There are people that battle for, jiu-jitsu as a school for life. And there are people looking at jiu-jitsu, let's just make money from this. Let's turn it into NBA, which I think is a terrible idea. I think we have nothing to gain from it. I'm puzzled when people argue with this with me because I'm like, what's the gain? Please tell me, because I don't see what's the gain.
What are you saying
So
exactly?
I don't think martial arts should be professional. I don't think it's advantageous. I think competition is advantageous, but I don't think the professionalization of jiu-jitsu or any other martial art is beneficial to the martial art. This was something Jigoro Kano argued against. He was adamant against it. He wanted judo to be a school for life. This is an educational model for children, and it comes with certain values. Like, was the second you turn, this is the problem. The second you turn it into a business, what does a businessman do? What is he looking at? What is the metric of success?
How to make money?
Optimize it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what everything else is. A second thought is a side effect. The when your aim, your sights on how do I optimize the money? That's what you're thinking. Look, I'm a gym owner, man. I've been teaching for 23 years, going on 24 now. I live this conflict daily. I hate being a business. I'm a martial artist. I tell people, I'm a martial artist, not a businessman. I'm a martial artist who happens to own a business. I'm not a businessman who happens to like martial arts. My values, I try my best with failures. I try to be different. I try to run. It's like I'm not going to let the client, the customer be right. You're not right. You're not. But I'm the customer. I don't care. The customer's not right in it. You're a white belt. I'm the black belt. I'm right. And there's a conflict of values. So you see what I'm getting at?
Sure.
The second you put the white belts in charge, the tendency is for them to derail the quality of the martial art because they're not concerned with the integrity of the art. They're going to do it. Half the people training jiu-jitsu, they're going to switch over to NASCAR in 3 years. They're going to switch over to the next trendy thing. I'm going to be here 20 years from now. I'm not going anywhere. So when people come in and they try to sensationalize jiu-jitsu and turn it into pro wrestling and turn it into a money grab, that bothers me because I'll be left here with what is left of jiu-jitsu because they're going to chew it. They're going to use the credibility that was built on the backs of these MMA fighters in the 80s and 90s. The credibility we have was built on their backs, not our backs. And then they use it, they abuse it, and then they spit it out and they move on to the next trend. I don't think these people should be in charge. So the idea that the customer should be in charge is absurd to me. But it's what you do if you want to run a successful business. Now, I am not funded by the government. Like wrestling can maintain itself pure because wrestling is government funded. Like wrestler, if you're a wrestling coach and you start complaining about something in the program, you don't like the methodology or you don't like the moves the wrestling coach is showing, the wrestling coach is going to show you the door because he's not he's not dependent on you as a customer. You're his student, you're not his customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have rent coming at you and the government does not fund you, right? That's a little bit different. So this is why I argue this, why wrestling has maintained itself a pure practice over the years and have not corrupted themselves is because it's not a money practice, which hurts the individual, but it benefits the art. So the wrestler, the individual, is hurt because he's out of college and he's an Olympic caliber athlete, and he might have to work as a salesman, a car salesman. He might have to get a regular job, even though it's better than 99% of these people making money from martial arts out there. But it's
Sure.
difficult to have a wrestling school because it's free. No one's going to pay for something that's typically used to having it for free. Whereas, a martial arts commercial practice, you make it profitable if you concern yourself first and foremost with the well-being of your customer, which may be at odds with what the martial arts stands for, which is just one off the top of my head, hierarchy, discipline, right? Courage. You throw yourself in the fire. I'm telling you, you're going to train with that. I don't want to train with that guy. Why not? Well, he's heavier than me. And what are you going to do? He's a paying customer. Like, who's in charge? So there's a conflict of values there. You see,
Sure.
this bothers me deeply because the best that jujitsu or martial arts, for that matter, have to offer is everything to do with these values: courage, discipline, accountability. That's the biggest change. That's the biggest one.
Mm.
You lost. Everyone today blames the coach, blames the training partners, blames the referee, blames the rules. It's part of the feel-good generation. You can't feel bad. You can't suffer. You can't struggle. Everyone's this little angelical, little soft, little snowflake that you can't get called on. You can't, everything's got to be perfect. My son is perfect. My child could do no wrong. It's the world we're living in. You can't criticize anyone. As a coach, I want you to internalize your loss and go, this is why you lost. I'll tell you why you lost. I want to help you, but I can't help you to climb Mount Everest unless I give you the route that you need to pursue to get there. It's not going to be easy, man. It's going to suck. You're going to fail a lot. And this is why you're failing. I have to give it to them, but they don't want to hear it. They want to feel good. And it's easier to blame someone else. As a martial artist, I have a hard time accepting that. But as a business owner, I have to. And this is kind of where martial arts always finds itself, is on between the commercial / professional practice and the educational practice that Jigoro Kano envisioned. I think Jigoro Kano was on the right track. There's some things that he wrote and believed in that I disagree with. But in general, I think judo is the most well-structured martial art on the planet. And the only reason I think techniques, like they've deviated a lot from the reality of combat, in my opinion. I think wrestling has the best mat ethos, like their mindset of how they train and how they envision practice and how disciplined these guys are. It is not a coincidence. The vast majority of UFC champions have come from collegiate wrestling. That is not a coincidence. Sure. And it's not the skills are part of it, but it's more than that. It's the mindset. Now, I interviewed Ben Askren not too long ago for my new book, right? I know he's not doing well, physically. I think he's sick right now. Hope he recovers. But I asked him this because
I want to know pneumonia or something like that.
Yeah, it's really bad apparently. But I interviewed him a few months ago, and I was trying to get at why is it that wrestling has maintained itself such a Spartan practice over the years? And he said, "Oh, it's because of all the competition." And I only half agree with him. It's like, man, BJJ has tons of competition too. Like, I think it's something else, and I can't put my finger on it. I think it's the fact that it's not commercial is one. It's not a commercial practice. Lots of competition is the other one. But what's interesting about wrestling, unlike judo, is that their code is not written down. Like Jigoro Kano did a very careful designing of a building before he built it. Like he had a very carefully designed blueprint. The architecture was all there. He had an architecture, he built. Wrestling doesn't have anything written down. If you have like defined wrestling from, like show me a book where the founder of wrestling defined it, it's not written down anywhere. But you go to any wrestling room in the world and it's the same Spartan practice. Like you have to be a warrior to survive. Because if you don't have it in you, man, you go do spelling bees, you go play robotics, go do, you go be a nerd somewhere else, man. You gotta be tough to survive this room. And it's the same in every wrestling room in the world. Like how the hell do they do that without having it in writing? Because, and the reason I say this is because BJJ used to be like that. BJJ was that 20, 30 years ago. You had to be a warrior to survive that room. You don't anymore. It's changed dramatically. Right? Just look, I'm not going to mention names. I'm tired of picking fights with people, but man, it's these guys would not survive a fight, man. Like they didn't even know
first started in the 90s and got injured a couple of times, and it was Fight Club.
Yeah.
Show up and it was Fight Club. Like there was dudes sleeping on piles of dirty geese in the corner that were training to be fighters. One of them made it to the UFC, and there was what it felt like to me at the time was this little group of dudes that are super connected to the coach, head owner. The rest of us are just here so these guys can beat the shit out of us, like that's literally what it felt like at the time.
Yeah.
But and if you couldn't hang, then get the hell out of here.
And that's the key word. If you couldn't hang. So in other words, everyone's welcome. It's a very meritocratic environment. Fighting ought to be, it isn't in some places, but it ought to be radically meritocratic. So if you can hang.
Please tell the rest of us meritocratic.
Like,
that tell us the meaning of meritocratic. Not all of us have your vocabulary.
You have to survive with the show. You want to be on these mats. It's like, for example, like a lot of people say, "Oh, the women weren't welcome in jiu-jitsu in the '80s." Yes, they were, but no one's going to lower the standards for them. Oh, kids weren't welcome. Yes, they were, but no one's going to lower the standards for them. The standards are here. You want to be a warrior. You want to call yourself a jiu-jitsu black belt. You want to be a trooper. You want to be respected. You want the respect that we have. This is where the bar is. Meet it or leave. No one's dropping the bar for you. Oh, but I'm a paying customer. Take your money somewhere else, buddy. We're broke. It's not going to make a difference. They're all broke anyway, so it made no difference.
Well,
Everyone trained for
that's,
free in
I mean,
those
I think
days.
we're
You
talking
know,
about culture, right?
a hundred
Culture,
percent.
honor. My dad was an old time weightlifter, and he like despises like the new gyms where it's air conditioned and just fancy corporate gym shit. And he would talk about like Arnold Schwarzenegger pumping iron, like these guys. Remember the movie Pumping Iron? Did you ever see it?
I
If
heard of it.
not,
Honestly,
you should watch it. It was Arnold
yeah,
Schwarzenegger, and it was like a documentary of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno getting ready to compete. They were like the two big dudes for Mr. Olympia, and like these guys are in like moldy basements, dark basements with like one light bulb, kind of like Rocky, kind of like
yeah,
emulated, like out there like running on the street with dirty sweatpants and out like Arnold would be out in the woods doing pull-ups on trees and it wasn't
yeah.
for the movie. It wasn't like nothing was fancy. And I'm very grateful. Dan's new gym, dude, we got the whole spring-loaded floor system. There's hot showers, there's a sauna, like all that stuff's amazing. But there's something to be said for like the people that subject themselves to that the
And
painful environment.
that's the key word right there. The people that subject themselves, because when you're in love with the practice, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are, how cold it is, how hard it is, how far it is. So what happens is, and this is, you go from a meritocratic environment of the survival of the fittest. You have the fittest individuals that survive that environment to a democratic practice where everyone's welcome. The problem with a democratic practice is that people are unlikely to meet the bar. They're going to want to lower it. People typically want more in exchange for less. If you give people a low dose of candy today, you can't give them less tomorrow. They want more. And it's the same with entertainment. It's the same with ease. Everything's got to be easy. They want it easier and easier and easier. They don't want it harder, but they want the prestige. But the problem is if you lower the bar too much, where everyone is a black belt, what's the value of a black belt all of a sudden? So
Right.
now black belt, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt was a highly prized black belt, is no longer the case. It's dropped a lot. So if you keep dropping the level, you keep dropping the bar, at some point it has no more value. And where do people go next? They go somewhere else where the value is. I believe it was an immense mistake of the jiu-jitsu community to allow the commercialization to take over. I'm not going to give names, but you can point them out. I know who the responsible people are because they were in charge of it and they didn't care because the money was too good. Because at some point, the money became more important than the martial art. And they can tippy-toe around the issue all they want. I'm not going to mention names, but like they're out there. And it
Do you
became,
think
yeah,
Do you think maybe here's a legit conversation that happened today? I got my hair cut yesterday. I've got an old time barber shop in my town, like the kind that like every town had, the old guy with the swirly barber thing outside. And it's dying, right? All these little places are just disappearing, and then you get these corporate places. And he needs a new barber to help him. He's like 80 years old, and I see the sign "barber wanted," and this guy's cut my hair forever. And I said, "Hey, like, how's that going? Getting another barber?" He goes, "It's not." And I'm like, "Well, how do people find out that you need a barber?" He goes, "The sign right there." I'm like, "So only your customers sitting in your chairs see the sign?" So I've got a pretty good following locally. So I take a selfie of me and him, and I take a picture of the sign and I share it on my Facebook. And I just tell a little story. This is a local barber shop. Anybody who's a barber or knows a barber, call this guy. Well, a couple people message me and they're like, there's other great barber shops. And I'm like, no, they're not the same. Like these are new barber shops where you got to go on an app to like message to get an appointment. An old barber shop, you walk in and you sit down and you read the newspaper and you drink coffee and you bullshit with the guy from the insurance office and the guy from the car dealer and you like commiserate. Anyway, it's like you're looking at it like I'm looking at the old barber shop, but these guys are happy to have the new one where they got 8 TVs playing and everybody's on their phone waiting for their turn. And there's chicks there cutting hair, which is not, I'm not against chicks cutting hair, but it ain't a barber shop. And it's like progress, I guess, in some way.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
you're looking at it from the perspective like it's still a haircut, but it ain't the same. And it's in does it hold up in violence? Does the stuff actually
I
are you passing on? Go ahead.
I know I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. I think we need value in the world. We've reached a point of technology and civilization where, I mean, I see homeless people with an iPhone. Like,
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's, I think there's still poverty out there. Don't get me wrong, but it's technology is solving that problem to a large extent. We have a bigger problem with obesity in the world than we do with starvation. That's the first time in human history that has happened. That is unique. We're living a unique moment. From a material perspective, we're doing incredibly well. We don't realize how well we are doing from a material perspective because we forget where we at and where we were 200 years ago. I live better than a king. If
Sure.
I was flying in the air the other day, and I thought, man, this is how crazy this is. I'm flying through the air in an airplane, right, going across the Atlantic, and I'm thinking to myself, if Julius Caesar, the emperor of Rome, could switch places with me, he would, because I live better than he did. I have access to more. I eat better than him. I have better health. I have better doctors. I have better sports equipment. I have more activities. I could travel the world faster. I live better than
Water not running in lead ducts to you.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
I have electricity that works. I have air conditioning. I have the amount of luxury we have in 2025.
Clothes
People
that can be
completely
instantly
look.
cleaned and
The obsession with material possessions, I think it's something that's pathological. There's something wrong with your head. You have everything you need, man. Even if you're poor, you have maybe you need new. I don't know, man. I'm not poor, so I'm not rich either. But like, I kind of want to, see that people don't struggle. But I see people that are poor with like plumbing and electricity and cell phones and video games at home and Netflix, and I'm going, man, you're doing better. You're living better than a king did. Right. My point is, it's not saying that we can't improve on our material, standing. It's not my point. My point is, people lack meaning in life. If everything is handed to you, nothing has meaning. If I hand you a black belt right now online, technically I could do it. No, I can sign off an IBJJF diploma and promote you to black belt right now. No one can say shit. You know that I can do that? I'm not gonna, but I can. Okay. But let's say I did that, Mike. What value would that black belt have to you?
none.
Okay. Now let's say 5 surgeries later, 12 years on the mats, killing yourself, traveling with your brothers and sisters, brothers in arms, going to war, coaching them coaching you, sweating, bleeding on the mats. Man, you put in your heart and soul into this for 12 years. And one day you win a big tournament, right? And I promote you to black belt on the podium in front of your friends and family. What does that mean to you?
Everything. Yeah.
Everything. I
Yeah.
think I think that's more valuable than anything else. Jiu-jitsu. The monetization of jiu-jitsu is fine. I don't mind. I like money too. I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. But if we lose value, we've lost what's most special about jiu-jitsu. And the problem with democratization, right, replacing the meritocratic system with a democratic one, is that you're going to lose value. It's inevitable. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. It's what happened. It happened to karate. We saw it happen to karate. Like I joke in my second book that Joe Rogan is jiu-jitsu's Elvis Presley. It is for jiu-jitsu what Elvis Presley was for karate, because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man.
karate back in the day, people were getting knocked out in practice. It was a tough guy practice. But once it blew up and it was in every street corner, every shopping mall, and Elvis was a big part of that. Like just Joe, and I'm not, Joe Rogan's done a lot for us. I'm not attacking him. He means well. But the side effects of the popularization is that, you're going to water it down because the masses, the clients, right, your customers, they're not going to want to pay more for a black belt. When I say pay, I'm not talking money. I'm talking about sweat, blood, and tears. They want it for less and less and less until it completely loses its meaning and value. And then, like I said, they move on to NASCAR or something else, and I will still be here. I don't know what's going to be left when they're gone. When it's no longer a trend, because it won't be in 20, 30 years, because it will fade away like everything else. So it bothers me, man, and I don't know where jiu-jitsu is going. Like I liked it because of the reasons I just gave you. That's what made it special to me. Um, but now I just feel it's turned into a money grab, man. Like all these guys talk about how can we make money from jiu-jitsu. Like, man, we're missing out on more important things. I think everyone that's trained jiu-jitsu needs to put their phone away and read Jigoro Kano. Like, I think we got to go back to that guy because I think he had something important to say. Martial arts ought to survive. They have to be more than self-defense and more than a professional practice. They have to be a form of education for the individual. And I mean that on the moral, intellectual, and physical level.
I like hearing that. That's how we've modeled our training. I look at like, of course, if I'm practicing swimming, I'm not practicing my kitchen skills, right? So I've got to like pay attention to what I'm paying attention to. But we can wrap a bunch of stuff up in the training that we can double duty on some of that stuff. Like the other day, I was watching grown men clean the mat, like guys that are one of them is a was a Division 1 wrestler. And he's a super successful guy in finance that could pay somebody to come clean the mat. Not that he would, but he understood the value in taking his turn as a white belt to scrub the mats down after training. Like
That's
that, where
humility, man.
I know other gym guys that successful gym owners, and I'm not a gym owner, but I know other guys uh, that do it themselves, and they go, these people pay to be here. They're not here to clean the mats, and I get that, but now they don't have ownership in that chunk of rubber. They don't. It's to them. It's a completely different space. They're not the ones maintaining it and picking the dirt and hair off of it. And now here's a silly story you'll appreciate. Years ago, we're at a gym and a dude walks out. We had a water fountain that to get to it, you had to cross the mat. And it was so people training could just fill their water bottle without having to put shoes on to go, walk to the other side of the gym. He gets dressed and he walks out on the mat with his shoes. And I'm on the bottom of somebody drilling and I see him and I said, "Hey, get off the mat." Just like that. I didn't get angry. And he keeps filling his water bottle. I said, "Get off the mat with your shoes on." And he
Yeah,
looked at me and kept filling his water bottle. And I got stern. I said, "Get the F off the mat with your shoes on." And we all
yeah,
know, like, it's not a big deal that you stepped on the mat with your shoes. We're covered in sweat and blood and spit
yeah,
and vomit sometimes.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
that, like, he didn't understand that. So I stood up. I wasn't going to hit him or anything. And I said, what the hell?" And he got off. And later we spoke, like a week later. And I said, "I don't understand." He goes, "I don't like being told what to do." And I said, "It's not me. You weren't defying me. It's not even
yeah.
my gym. I'm just a member here." I'm like, "You don't understand what you were even doing." And then I thought
You-
nobody ever told him. He didn't even know like what he was doing, where I've been in places somebody would have walked up and blasted me right in the mouth had I not
yeah.
immediately stepped off the mat.
Yeah. In the 90s, you would have that guy would have gotten punched in the teeth. You've been choked out
Right.
by everyone. He got the shit beat out of him for doing it. You know
100%.
what? I think it was funny, man. Just giving a difference, like how different we are from, Japan, for example. And some we have a lot to learn from them. Like I'm not saying I want to be like them, but I think they have very important things to teach us. When I was there for the documentary, I went to a Kosen Judo. Kosen Judo is a style of judo. It's very similar to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I was curious because they were reaching a lot of the same conclusions that Brazilians reached just in the 1920s and 30s, way before Brazilians did, right? So I was curious. I went to one of their schools, and we got there like maybe 30 minutes ahead of time because we want to set up cameras and everything and get a feel for the place. Beautiful building, Tokyo University. We went there, and man, when he got there, there were students arriving at the same time. They were 30 minutes early for class. Black belts. You know what the black belts were doing, Mike? They got there 30 minutes early to sweep the mats. The black belts, not the white belts, the black belts. They got there 30 minutes early to sweep the mats. And I'm like,
That's
I've been
cool.
doing in jujitsu at the time would have been 23. Now it's going on 28, whatever it was at the time. But I've never seen anyone do that. I've never seen that in my life. And it was a level of respect that they had for the mats. And you think that anyone would step with their shoes on the mats? And it's not just like, sure, you can clean it afterwards. You're gonna have to clean it anyway, right? But it's just
It's
the love.
reverence.
Yes, the reverence for something that is, it's like a church. That's how they look at it, man. Like that's what it
Mm.
feels like. You go like some of these judo schools, you go to the Kodokan, it feels like you feel like you're going to church. Like even if you don't believe what the priest is saying, you should be respectful because these people do. This is their community. This is what bonds them. See this right here? This is social glue. These people work together because they believe in the same things. They have the same set of values, and that unites their community, and that's a good thing, right? They believe in the same things, working together. Here you come with your arrogant ass stepping on the mats or screaming in a church, right? Like you can't. You have to be respectful of the people's environment. So even if this guy doesn't train, he doesn't see the point of not stepping on the mats. He's out of line. And these are things that, people don't step on the mats normally. That's unusual, you know that. But actually, we had a homeless guy walking, stepped on the mats. We had to we had to go old school on him a little bit, but not too bad.
That's
but
funny.
but
How do you've
yeah.
got 100 affiliates?
No, no, well, not I have partner, right?
Okay.
We have most of them are in Brazil. I manage North America, Europe, and Australia.
So you've got many schools that have your flag on the wall,
Yeah.
which is directly to how do you help instill this culture? For example, my friend Z, I told you about, I'm messaging him as I'm talking. I asked, do you have any questions for Rob? And he said, well, Rob doesn't know me, but I'm one of his black belts, as I told you earlier. And so, like, here's a guy that flies your flag that you don't even know his name, right? And he's a black belt teaching. So, how do you help that culture exist when you have guys that are teaching with your name on their gi? Like, what's that look like?
Here's the thing, man. These guys are under me, under students of students. They might follow the curriculum, but when it comes to the values and beliefs, they're really jujitsu today in 2025. It used to be under the Gracie family, and that was a good and a bad thing. We can talk about that next. But now it's in the hands of Instagram. Instagram's in charge. The real leader in jiu-jitsu today is Instagram, which is a bunch of white belts voting, basically. It's no one, that's not the wise, experienced people that are surface. It's always the white belts clicking. It's got a million clicks. It's funny. It's entertaining. It rises to the top. It frames jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu in general, beyond my own affiliation, it's being modeled after the internet.
Hmm.
I've had this chat with the IBJJF before. I think that there should be some steps that we can make collectively to try to, frame the culture. Like we talked about culture a minute ago and how wrestling had a phenomenal culture, even though it's not written down, which I think is so unusual. Judo has it written down. It's very carefully, like maybe not carefully, but it's written down. Like people at least agree on what judo is. It's unlikely to change, at least in philosophical terms or cultural terms. I would like to see something similar for jiu-jitsu. And I thought about writing something up and getting people to do their best to instill fight this battle against Instagram, because that's who we're fighting, really. It's Instagram. They're dominant force in jiu-jitsu today. It's not the IBJJF, it's not ACC, it's not any character, it's Instagram. And it's funny because I have a timeline in my book, like from all the events that are relevant to the history of jiu-jitsu,
Which
starting with,
book?
well, both of them have timelines, but the timeline I'm referring to is the second book, The Rise and Evolution of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And this timeline starting with, Commodore Perry's gunboat diplomacy against Edo, when they basically forced the shogun to open, not forced, but like, hey, man, you either do business with us or we're going to blow your city up. And that's the beginning of the story, right? Really. But that's not my reading. That's Roberto Pedreira's reading, but I follow him a lot. And all the events that are relevant to the history of jiu-jitsu. And the last one is the creation of Instagram, I believe in 2010 or 12. I can't remember exactly when it was invented, but that's the last date on the timeline, because Instagram today is the dominant force in shaping, I mean, not just jiu-jitsu, politics really a lot. It's a very, very powerful tool, which is kind of scary because it's not really there's no criteria. The criteria is, do people like it? And that's not a good criteria for anything. That's terrifying criteria, because it's kind of like Wikipedia. You can't rely on it. It's just too unpredictable. Like you can't, like when people use like Reddit and ChatGPT and Wikipedia as sources of knowledge, I'm like, I don't think you understand what you're doing, man.
Hmm.
Like all ChatGPT is doing is throwing a wide net on the internet and picking up whatever it finds to be reasonable or average of what people are saying. It's not
Right.
scrutinized. It's not empirical. It's not an academic opinion. It's a computer doesn't, it's not thinking. What it just throws it out there. What can I grab? And it's going to pull something out of the internet and give it to you. Now it's normally correct, which is why it's so scary, right? Because the times it's not correct, you'll be wrong, and you might be fatally wrong. Like there are people making investments on based on what AI says. I'm like, really, man? Like
Sure.
life
Sure.
changes. You're gonna sell your house based on what this computer says? Like there's, some of it is just terrifying. And the internet is not an environment prone to scrutiny and rigor. It goes, I'm a white belt, I click. A red belt in Brazil with 60 years of jiu-jitsu, he clicks, it's one click. The clicks, there's no how the clicks did not distinguish between ranks. So if you're a scientist with a Nobel Prize, 3 PhDs, and you are an illiterate guy who's never read a book, and you can't even read, and you have access to a phone, you click, those clicks are equal. So we are talking about a guy with a Nobel Prize winner, or a Red Belt for that matter, who has an equal say in shaping culture as someone who doesn't know how to read. And I think that's a terrifying feature of the world we're living in,
Well, I
because
think
there's no
that's the
more
same
expertise.
thing of protesters screaming in the streets. I'm not trying to make a comparison because it's what's happening right now, but because a mob or a loud voice has a message to tell doesn't mean it's the best thing for a country or a state or whatever. It's because somebody's angry and can be
You know?
loud. I think it's the same
Yeah.
kind of
Well, it's not
idiot.
rational. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not rational.
Well,
It's not
for
like,
for
go ahead.
medicine now. Nobody believes. I shouldn't. You made a comment earlier I was going to push back on, but I understood you were making a broad stroke. I just said nobody, but it's very easy to dismiss science. Like, and the whole idea of science is that you said empirical. This is codified shit that you can go to a lab and test it. I can go to a lab and test it. She can test it, and that makes it scientific. And now, I don't know. I don't believe that stuff. Like, but that's literally like the very basis of it. And
Well,
so now you have people making like medical decisions, or rather not making a medical decision because they just don't believe doctors anymore. And of
but
course, there's
but
some really shitty stuff that happened. Go ahead.
what happened to medicine in this country and science is something similar to what I'm talking about in jiu-jitsu.
That's why I
They
thought of it.
yeah,
Yes.
they put money as the metric of success, not health. And as a result, doctors and pharmaceuticals have become incredibly corrupt and have given science and academia a bad name in the process. Like, this is not academia's fault. This is not the fault of science. The scientific method has nothing to do with doctors and pharmaceuticals becoming corrupted because they're looking at what? Money above health.
Money, money.
Money above health. Because once you put money as a metric to be pursued, your values are adjusted accordingly. You understand? Meaning, if people are healthy or not, that's a side effect. That's great if they are, but if not, as long as we're making money, because that's the important thing. And it's something similar happens to jiu-jitsu, which is why, like, it's how something becomes corrupted once you lose sight of what the purpose of it is. The purpose of medicine is to heal, not to make money. Making money is a side effect. The purpose is healing, right? The purpose of jiu-jitsu is to educate, not make money. Money is a side effect, right? The purpose of, like, and it goes for everything. And I see this, that the lack of credibility. I mean, you see people. I have people to argue with me. They don't want to go to school. They don't think universities are important anymore. Granted, the humanities have gone to shit, but it's not science's fault. It's not the fault of education. It is the fault that individuals have become corrupted, including, the educational system. It's become corrupted as well. And then people go and educate themselves on YouTube and TikTok, which is even worse. So it's a scary picture, man. Like, who would have known that the excess of information would have made people less informed? I I used to say this all the time. Like, the reason why the world is so messed up is because people don't have access to information and means to express
Mm,
their opinions. I don't say that anymore. It's like the opposite now. You have all the information of the world and you're able to express your opinion, but if you don't have the filters to critically think your opinions and the information you're receiving, maybe you're better off without it, man. Like, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have access to information, but I think there's a failure of education and this skepticism towards science and academia in general, this anti-intellectualism that is so rampant in this country, is a side effect of people not learning what science is properly. They associate the corrupt doctor with science. So if the doctor is corrupt because he's prescribed me all this medicine he shouldn't be, because he's getting the kickback from prescribing me Adderall, and I dealt with that firsthand. Doctors pushing drugs on me that I don't want to take. I've dealt with that myself, and I couldn't even believe it. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm telling you, I don't need this, and they're pushing it on me, right? But that's a problem of a doctor becoming corrupt. It's not an issue of medicine as a field. These are very different things. But people, it gets mixed up. And then now
mm,
people don't believe in vaccines anymore. Because sure, there was some
sure.
messed up things that happened. I agree. But you're going to tell me that all vaccines are bad? I'm like, hold up here, man. Like, let's not throw the baby out with the water. Vaccines are good. Yeah, they got to be tested, sure. There was a lot of corruption going on in COVID. I'm not going to pick that fight with anyone because I
Right.
believe that there was a but science is still good, people. Like medicine is a good thing. We live longer, and your babies are surviving birth because of science. We have a cell phone because of science. We have electricity because of science. I think people often fail to see that and just attack it without really thinking about what it is that they're attacking.
My favorite part of history was to study would be like our early American culture, colonial times on through the revolution. That's like kind of a been a big hobby of mine. I visited most of the signers of the declarations graves, most of the founders' historic sites. Um, those guys loved knowledge. And that, they didn't know the same things we know today about like the natural world, but they studied Greek and Latin and philosophy and the science for how they understood it at the time and the constellations and the planets. And you go to like Philadelphia or Boston or some of those cities, and these buildings exist like in Philly that was completely dedicated to these guys just getting together and like, hey, let's look at this Latin text together. And that was them sitting around after their workday, just like
Yeah.
developing this knowledge, whatever it might have been. They all pushed it, right? Franklin helped build libraries and create colleges, and so did Jefferson, and so did many of them. It's a strange thing that now we seek to do as much as we can to just uh, placate ourselves and like
You know, I just finished reading Thomas Jefferson's biography not too long ago. Thomas Jefferson couldn't wait to get home to read philosophy,
mm-hmm.
and
It,
then and it just and then it goes like where are we today? We people shit on books. My students tell me they think reading is a waste of time. They don't understand why I
really.
read. Oh, they just Google it, dude.
Mm.
Talk to any 22-year-old. Talk to anyone who grew up with on the internet. They think that reading and writing are a waste of time because you can Google it and you have ChatGPT to write for you. And they laugh. They think I'm old and crazy. My students think I'm fucking old and crazy. I'm just like, you guys are so stupid. You don't even know how stupid you are. You're not
And
even
then you
aware
elbow
of it.
strike them in the face.
I would like to, but like, I try to convince them with arguments, but it's sometimes I get angry. I'm like, dude, you don't know what you're doing, man.
I
Like
love Audible,
yeah,
but
sure.
it's not reading,
It's
and
not
it
the
takes
same.
like
Yeah.
it's not the same as sitting in it, like the act of I can listen to Audible while I'm chopping vegetables, while I'm driving, while I'm
Yeah.
doing all these other things. When you're reading, and
Yeah.
you can't ride a lawnmower and read a book. You can't do those things. You have to immerse yourself in it.
You know what the problem is with not reading? That's how we go from Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. That's how that happens, bro. That's how we go from great men like Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln to the pits of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and Biden. That's what we're left with,
I
regardless
don't
of what people
disagree.
think. I know that, but Trump did, and someone out there's going to write me later, bro. I'm not even arguing politics. I'm just saying that we can do better. Let's be honest.
I
Let's be
agree.
honest, man. Like, compare Thomas Jefferson can't wait to get home to read Immanuel Kant. Like, what, dude? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, we're not even. It's not even close. We
I
deserve
read
better.
that you
We all
you
deserve better.
wrote. I don't disagree. You wrote that you sometimes you feel um, maybe like it's not the correct or proper thing to do, but as you enter somebody's home or space and you see a wall of books like I've got behind me, you maybe glance and see what's in there to kind of like, get a little idea what people are all about. Talk about that a little bit.
Um, yeah, I I don't know if it's judgmental or not, but I do that. When I walk into someone's home, I first thing I look and say, what see
Wait,
what they're
say that
reading.
say
And
that
I
again. You broke up for a
wh-
second. What did you
when
say?
I walk into someone's home, I'm drawn to their bookshelf. I want to see what they're reading. Because a lot of times you make a new friend, you're like, oh, we have a lot of books in common, or we can talk about this or that. Because I think that's a superior form of entertainment. Like people see reading as a chore. I see reading as a very, very human act. You're interacting with a text in a way that is deeper, in some ways even deeper than human interaction, because you can never live long enough to know all that many people that well. Whereas when
Mm,
you're reading, you can really dive into the like certain topics in a way that man, it's hard to do that in interacting with people. It's very, how many deep dives have you had to anyone in your life? Like to dive deep, like really know that person. It's rare that you have that sort of connection. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm saying it's different, sure, but it's a very I don't know, man. Like it's a text is a way of interacting with the world that I don't think you can replace with video, audio, or even human interactions. It's just different. It's its own thing. And I think it's the way of thinking. I call it working out for the brain. Like you exercise, don't you? You exercise, you run sprints, you lift weights, you do jujitsu,
You
whatever.
can't tell by looking at me, coach. Come
Yeah,
on.
no, probably I can tell. But when you're reading, you're working your brain in a way that I don't think you can replace it. And I think I see a generation of people that thinking Google replaces it or YouTube videos replace it. And I don't think it's the same. Because to your point, when you're reading, you're engaged, and it requires a level of focus that you don't need when you're doing other things. Like I think that videos and music and the back, all of this is distracting. Like reading is you have to have a level of focus and interaction with the text that I don't think you can replace that. And I think it's sad that a lot of young people are younger than me, like they don't read at all and they don't think it's necessary and they think they're fine with YouTube videos. And I'm like, man, it's not the same. It's like do I compare it to my students? And they kind of understand, but kind of don't. It's like telling me you can learn jujitsu on YouTube. You can't. Anyone who trains jujitsu, no, you got to be on the mats. It's like it's the same with thinking. You have to learn how to think. You have to interact with people that think better than you. You can't be training with people that think less than you. You have to interact with people that think higher than you. So you can raise the bar of your thinking to their level. And how it's hard to do that online. It's hard to do. You gotta have to dig through books. It's like, what are these people saying? How are they saying? And why are these men brilliant? And why are they so influential? And why do they shape the world we're living in? What is it that they're saying? You get to the bottom of things. And I don't see that happening outside of reading. So I'm very interested. I'm not the most avid reader in the world, but I love books. I'm never not reading something.
I go through phases. As a young man, I was the kid with the flashlight under the covers, reading
Yeah,
stuff like because we didn't have a phone or TV or any of that shit in our bedrooms like people do nowadays. But um, I'll go through phases. I I very much enjoy it. I also like the idea of owning it. Like I've got Audible. Yes, you can download
yeah,
a book and like store it on your
yeah,
computer, but I don't need any technology other than light to read. As long as I have,
yeah,
the thing, I own it. It's mine. I kind of like that too.
yeah.
I can loan it
No,
to you.
yeah, my biggest fear is my house burning down because I lose my books. If someone breaks into my house and they steal my TV, my money, like I don't have anything at home for the record, but if I did, like I don't steal my TV, my computer, I don't give a shit. I really don't. Like I'm like,
Just don't take my
but
books, man.
don't steal my books. But I saw a meme the other day, and I love this. It was like some store I don't know where they keep the books out at night. They just keep them on the street. And they said like the reason we do this is because people who read don't steal, and people who steal don't read. I don't know. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I liked it. It was like, oh man, because like it's true, you would never steal a book. Like anyone who reads would never steal a book, and I think very few thieves
There was
probably
this
read
one
them.
swimsuit edition Sports Illustrated book I remember was at the Barnes and Noble one time. I was probably a teenager. I remember maybe that would be one I'd steal. That was kind of a joke, but
I can see a teenager doing that or something, but I think most adults is like, man, you know what, man, this guy put in all this time to write this book, and I'm paying $30 for it, and
yeah,
the
I'm not
publisher's
grabbing
going to
a
keep like
copy of
20.
War and Peace and running off.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't mind. Like I gladly and I buy them on Amazon for dirt cheap. I can't even believe like some like they're like $6, $7. I can't even believe that they're that cheap when you think about
Right.
it. So
Although what's
I'm proud of
crazy, because stuff's not always in print anymore, you'll find a book that used to be $5 and now they want 100 because it's, out of
it.
print
Oh,
and
it's out
it's
of
just,
print. That happens.
yeah.
I've said no to books that were more than $50, even though I wanted them. Like I'm not paying $50 for a book.
I'll
I
try to
got
find
others
the
to read.
used one. Try to
But
find the
even
used one.
those, man, like sometimes it's rare. You get some books that are like in short that are hard to find, and the price goes up. You know,
I've got one back there I recently bought something about John Kennedy. Hey, my buddy Z sent me a message, kind of a switch of topic, but still along the BJJ thread. He said, "What does Rob think about the CLA versus traditional IP approach to BJJ?
Dude, I can't. Can you break down what CLA is to me? Like,
I don't know either. I
is
figured you
I
would.
think it's the ecological training that everyone's talking about.
Yes.
Is it ecological training? Just ask it. I think that's what it is.
Um,
Yeah, because
Uh,
if it is, this is what I think.
constraints-led approach focuses on manipulating the training environment to promote
Is
skill development through discovery and problem solving rather than traditional step-by-step instruction.
this is
Yeah,
where
constraint-led approach based off of ecological
there we go. That's
dynamics.
what I thought. Okay, all right. This is what I think. I think people are bored. I think we're addicted to entertainment, and there's got to be something new on the screen every 5 seconds. And people are bored that there's too many techniques, so now people are looking elsewhere. So what's the new methodology? So I read articles on this ecological training, and I reached the conclusion they're not doing anything we're not already doing. I think they're using a lot of fancy words to pretend that they're doing something new when it's something that everyone's always been doing in jiu-jitsu, my opinion. I'm yet to see them do anything. And I've read some of the exercises, and I'm like, oh, I do that in my kids' class every day. I've been doing it for 20 years. It's nothing new. Granted, if you put a new label on it, you can sell it. So there are some
Mm.
advantages to like just people it might give you new ideas. I'm not against new ideas. I'm constantly changing my own methodology. But what's interesting about this goes back to my beef with the internet. Is the other day, a friend of mine, a student of mine, sent me a debate between a jiu-jitsu purple belt, qualified purple belt, but still a purple belt, and a guy, I'm not going to remember his name, but he's the coach promoting this ecological training. And they're debating methodology. And I'm like, it is a wild, wild world we're living in when we have Carlos Gracie Jr., Zé Radiola, Rodrigo Feijão, Wendell Alexander, Lloyd Irvin. We have Paulão Rezende. We have Rodrigo Cavaca. We have these phenomenal coaches that have produced champion after champion after champion for decades. And here we have a debate between a purple belt and the coach who, no disrespect, I don't know, he might be great, but I've never heard of him. And I follow high level jiu-jitsu very closely. It is wild that the internet does that. Like it would be like having Michael Jordan in the room and asking basketball questions to like a high school player. I'm like,
Dude, I got a
it's
perfect
insane.
analogy. So in the space I'm in, the idea of being able to tourniquet a limb has become
Yeah,
like this sexy training thing. In fact, I'm sure there's several tourniquets within reach here in the podcast room, but it's trained for a specific person. And I'm an EMT, by the way, so we teach this stuff. And a friend of mine who's a famous firearms instructor tells a story, and this is exactly what he's talking about. They're out to dinner after some firearms and medical combative type training scenarios. And all of these students who come from various backgrounds, accountants, jujitsu teachers, whatever, but not combat medicine, are arguing who makes the best commercial tourniquet. And there's a couple big ones, CAT made by North American Rescue, blah, blah, blah. And one of the guys at the table was a naval PJ or Air Force PJ, pardon me. Arguably one of the hardest special operations pipelines on the planet. They are literally looked at as superhuman. They've got to be like capable of swimming, running, shooting guns, and they're like really high level trauma medicine guys out in the field. An F-15 crashes, they're the guys that go fricking rescue the down pilot out, and they gotta be able to get him out alive and do the medical treatment. So they ask him, the guy telling the story is like, hey, why don't you ask Bob at the end of the table? He's a 20-year Air Force PJ. And Bob says, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, we don't agree. We agree this one's better. And their body of knowledge was like hours on the discussion. This guy lived it for 20 years and he's
yeah,
eating his dinner and he just says to them, well, that's cool. Your opinion doesn't trump like my life experience. Like,
yeah,
cool. Do what you're going to do,
yeah.
idiots.
And that's a feature of the internet and the democratic age, or all opinions are equal. Well, clearly they're not. You see, like we've taken the idea of equality far too far. We've taken it everywhere. We're like, no, 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 no. There's some places where there's no equality. There's no equality. What are you talking about? Black belt and white belt, they're not equal. An illiterate person, a PhD, they're not equal. Not in
Mm-hmm.
that regard. I'm talking about rights. I'm talking about expertise. The internet nullifies all hierarchy. It displaces all hierarchy. It places every person with an access to a phone at equal grounds of voting for the algorithm, because that's what they're doing. They're voting with their clicks and determining what is relevant and what are the values and what are the cultures our civilization will be upholding, because children are watching. So they're going, this is more important because it has 1 million clicks. This one has 50 clicks. Clearly, it is more valuable. So we're determining a hierarchy of values every time these people are clicking. And it leads these people to believe that they know as much because they have the same power of clicking. And
I see
it's
that.
awful. It's terrible. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's in my space a lot. I have a decent following of people online. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there's 360 some odd thousand people that subscribe to the channel. Pat myself on the back, but that doesn't mean I know shit other than how to build a following on a social media platform.
Yeah,
And there's people that will pay really good money to somebody like me to become an authority. And I'll say, well, I don't really know anything about that thing. So I'm not going to talk about
but
whatever the thing is and take your money because that would be foolish. But I know a guy, that might. So let's call him.
that's wisdom. That's wisdom, is acknowledging ignorance, and I'm ignorant. That's why I like to read, try not to be. I know jujitsu, I know jujitsu history. That's about it. Everything else I'm curious about, I might be opinionated about, but I'm not an expert in much else. And I think that's fine. It's just that I think the internet gives people a false sense of confidence. It's like Dunning-Kruger effect sort of thing.
Mm.
You think you know more than you do.
So this ecological approach is not something that you do
I don't think
personally.
it's new. I don't think it's I don't I've seen them do it. I'm a very results. Like if they can I'll summarize this conversation. BJJ is in its infancy as far as a martial art, right? It's a very young sport compared to judo, boxing, and wrestling, for example. No one's going to convince me that the Olympic arts, judo, boxing, and wrestling, have inferior methodology to us. Now, remember, these are government funded sports with brilliant minds behind them, very performance oriented. Just think Cold War here, the United States versus Soviet Union. Very, very survival of the fittest, show results or get your head chopped off kind of environment. And these people have honed their methodology over the years to be what they are. Now you're going to tell me that BJJ, as young as it is going to revolutionize methodology and tell me that we have something better than what wrestlers and judokas and boxers are doing? I'm like, I don't buy it. We're babies. In terms of methodology, we're light years behind wrestling and judo. It's just that we don't think so because we're the trendy martial art. But I watch these guys teach. They I'm telling you, man, it's bad. It's bad. And the problem is the customer is in charge, because if you change it, it's going to be boring. And people don't like boring. They got to be excited all the time. They got to be fun, 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 fun. Okay, but now you're hurting your own performance because you can't have both, because performance is going to be hard and boring sometimes.
There's
Fun,
a price to
fun,
pay.
a very high price to pay, which is why a wrestler can drill for 2 hours a day and not complain. Jiu-jitsu people, they can't even get them to drill for 5 minutes. They do the move 3 times. They say, I know the move.
You're
I
you're a
know the
champion,
move.
so you know what it takes. I've got a friend from our gym. His name's Bryce Frank. He was a national Muay Thai heavyweight champ. He was, I think, ranked two. He's a brown belt now under Dan. Really excellent. He's one of my favorite training partners because he trains like a champion. And he's a cop, and he used to go from way out west of here, and he'd drive to Milwaukee to Duke Rufus's school, which is hours, like just for like an hour session. So he'd drive, work all day, get in his car, drive like 3 hours, train for an hour, and then zip to somewhere else because like a good fighter was in town that he could spar with to like, get some good time in with somebody. And this was like daily for years, like just on the road and then still raising kids, doing a job. And he'll finish his job and drive an hour to the jujitsu gym. And he doesn't say like, "Oh hell, I'm driving all over." You never hear him say shit about it. And he shows up, and he's an old guy like me, and throws his gi on or whatever, and goes to town. It's a different. And then when he's training, the dude's training. He ain't on his phone. He ain't playing around. And there's no like, oh, it's hot or it sucks or any of that. It's like, let's do this. And then when we're done, he grabs his shit and he goes on to whatever the next thing is.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, like this, the methodology thing, man, like I hear this all the time. Like, and my students are like bored because they want new things all the time. So they want me to change the methodology. I'm like, listen, man, I know what I'm doing. I've trained champions. I've seen other champions train. I've learned a lot from wrestlers and boxers because I boxed and I wrestled from MMA and I've been to boxing gyms and I see how they do things. I'm like, we can borrow this, man. This is very intelligent. What they're doing here, I see what they're doing, and it's through trial and error. But I don't think that the ecological, I don't think it's anything revolutionary. I think people are just bored and they need something new to talk about. You know what they do with positions? They do this all the time. They get a position that's like 50 years old, and they give it a new name. And then they release some instructionals. They make a few $1 million from the instructions. Like, oh my God, it's a revolution. I'm like, no, bro, this is 50 years old. You just put a new label on. It's like replacing the Coke bottle I labeled with like a different new color, and people think they're drinking something different. It's the same product. You just put a new label on it.
Sure.
You
That makes sense. There was a question I was just about to ask you. It just popped right out of my head. Craig Jones, that was Z's other question since it's in front of me. What do you think of Craig Jones? That's what he said. He says, what does he think of Craig Jones?
I like Craig as a person. I've had a few interactions. He's come to my gym a bunch when he was a purple. I used to visit my gym. I like the guy as a person. I'm against professionalization of jiu-jitsu in general. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's healthy. But all these guys are gonna make the other money. What people are making money? What people are making money? Like 5 promoters and like 12 athletes. Let me rephrase that. Promoters are all losing money. Ain't no one making money from professional jiu-jitsu here. They're all losing money. They're all losing money. All of them. The only people making money from jiu-jitsu are gym owners and people running tournaments. No one else making, maybe like gi manufacturers and whatever. But the professional promoters are not making money. They're losing money. I've seen this movie a million times. Guy comes in with millions of dollars, big kahuna. I'm business guy. I know jujitsu. They buy their way into the community with their dollars. And he comes in with his big swinging dick and says, I'm going to show these guys how business is done. Because he wants to be respected in jujitsu because he's a white belt. Everyone treats him well because he's rich. So he dumps $4 million, $5 million into it fails because this is a community of practitioners, not of fans. This is not the NFL. If it will be one day, remains to be seen. I personally don't think so. Well, first, it's undesirable. Second, I don't think it's possible because it's a community of practitioners and people don't like to pay. They like it free because they see it every day. They're not average fans like the NFL has.
Yeah.
So the professional model is something I think is difficult and I'm against it in principle because it brings bad values into the community. Like it benefits half a dozen of professional athletes, which is good for them as individuals. But for you to sell, you have to act like Conor McGregor. Conor is a perfect example of this, and he's a phenomenal fighter. I'm not trying to pick a fight with Conor. He's a great fighter. He's very good at selling fights. That's his strongest asset. Like, he's great at selling fights. But for Conor to sell fights, if he has to insult someone's religion, if he has to insult someone's father, insult someone's country, he will do so. Now, here's my question to you, Mike. Would you teach that to your children?
No.
So why are we applauding Conor McGregor? If we wouldn't teach that to our children, why are we watching the guy fight? I don't watch him. I boycott. I watch him fight Khabib because I love Khabib. Khabib is one of my favorite fighters of all time. Khabib, like to me, like that's what a fighter should look like. That's fucking real right there. So I watch him because I really wanted Khabib to win, so I was happy. But other than that, I don't watch him. I don't watch him because I don't think I refuse to support anyone who's not who behaves in any way that I would not approve of, or I would not want my children to be, to be acting like. So I boycott. And like, oh, it's just one person, no one gives a shit, fine. But it's my vote. You're not going to get my vote. You're not going to get my money. Because I don't think it's a good example for children to uphold. Because when your child sees you applauding the guy or talking about him or following him or watching him or talking about his fight, your children are listening. Now, we think that children go by what they say, but children are much better learners than we think. Children don't give two shits what you tell them. It means nothing to them. I remember this as a child because like people would try to get me to do things. I'm like, you're a hypocrite because you don't do it yourself. It's like when you tell your child to read and study, but you don't study. You tell your child to work out, but you don't work out. All you're teaching your child is hypocrisy. Your child goes by what you do. They're watching what you do. You understand? So when you watch a douchebag act like a jackass on TV, and you're applauding the Kardashians, and you're applauding Pablo Escobar, and you're applauding like all these people that are not role models for society, right? Why are you surprised that your children don't respect you. Like they grow up not to respect and have horrible values and want the wrong things and not want to study. Like you've been teaching that. Like it starts with the music you listen to. It starts with the movies you watch with your kids. It starts with the values you uphold in front of them. And if you apply these things, yes, you're not going to have a child that is upholding good values, you know. And I think that martial arts should teach these things. So which is why I only praise Khabib in front of my students. I praise Khabib. And that to me, like that's a good example of a fighter. GSP, Randy Couture, these are great role
Yeah.
models, great guys to follow. Great guys to follow, man. GSP, phenomenal fighter, person. Roger Gracie, another one. You know, I think his public figure is like, man, that's good.
I think we're talking about culture again.
Yeah, it's important. It's
Yeah. You
important.
know, I had a man I look up to talking about politics, and he said something to me um, based on kind of the earlier part of our conversation where you brought up presidents. And he said, quite simply, would you want your kid to look up to the man that's in the White House? Like, would you want them to act like and emulate? And he was basically saying, like, when's the last time we had a man like that, besides being charismatic or powerful or a great orator? Like, would you want them to exude the values that that person lives by?
Yeah.
And that's like, man, we haven't really had one of those in a real long
You,
time.
you you know why? You know why, Mike? Because a guy like that would never make it far in politics. So I remember when people are excited about Obama, I remember well. I'm like, man, it's the same. It's all you don't make it far in that game unless you're already corrupted because you have to play the game, and the game is corrupt. It's amoral. Machiavelli said, right? It's amoral, not immoral. It's amoral. It just lacks morality. You're supposed to win. How you do it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how. You're not supposed to. You don't live by principles. You live by what is it that gets me to win. You
Hmm.
do that. If it happens to be something that benefits the world, you advertise it. You put it on Instagram. If it's something that is damaging to people, you sweep it under the rug. And that's the game of politics. You don't survive that game if you have good intentions, if you're honest. You just don't. You're going to eat. You don't make it to city council, man. You think you make it to the presidency? You have to be corrupt. You're your personality because you live by a game of power. Treating you if you're a politician, you treat the rich guy the same as you treat the waiter. Like, where does your energy go to? It goes to the rich people, right?
I
Why
think
why
there
would you
are
spend
some.
your energy?
I know some people involved in politics, and I was the vice chair of a political party. So I knew some men that were good men and women, but by and large, the ones that stood on ethics didn't go very far. And it wasn't because somebody said, oh, they're too ethical. It was just that they weren't willing to play the game
Yeah,
to
but that's
win.
ethics.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
see, but not playing the game is ethical because the
Sure.
game demands that you bend the rules and your principles. You understand? And when you start bending your principles, man, the more you do it, after a while, you don't even realize you're doing it anymore. It's just normal. You're just playing the game.
Right.
You know, dude. And I'm in jujitsu. That's a very small scale politics, and I see this left, right, and center. It's like I imagine at the White House level, and I'm like, dude, I just well, that's when people were excited about Obama. I was just like, man, don't think, I don't think anyone would make it that very far. Like you just don't. You
You
know?
might not want to comment on this, and we can delete it if you don't, but like the stuff going on with like Gordon Ryan, that kind of stuff. How do you feel about that as a guy that fancies himself as a ambassador of the art?
I have nothing against. I don't look. I don't know Gordon Ryan personally. I've exchanged insults with him online a few times. Granted, you know, I think of the 10 times of exchanging messages with him, 9 out of 10 he's come after me. I think one time I went after him and I shouldn't have. I regret it because I'm not good online. I'm not good at talking shit and I'm not good at manipulating algorithms and people online. It's not something I'm good at, so I don't do it anymore. I learned that from talking to people that argue with people online. You just don't. It's a waste of your time and energy. I think he's
Yeah.
a phenomenal grappler. I think he's a phenomenal grappler. He's never, in my opinion, he can never be the GOAT because he doesn't do gi. The GOAT's got to do both. Gi and jiu-jitsu is both. If you put a guy on a pedestal for being a good no-gi grappler, then where exactly do we put the people that are good in gi and no-gi? Because being good in both is harder didn't begin good and only one. So if he's great, then our people are greater than him because they've done both. With that being said, he's a very dominant grappler without the gi. Very good. I don't think he's a good role model for jiu-jitsu. He's an awful role model for jiu-jitsu as a whole. I think he'll do what's best for him always. He's not thinking, it's what's best for Gordon is what Gordon's going to do. And I think that's the kind of, we're teaching children because people look up to him because he's such a phenomenal grappler. I think people are learning from him. Children are learning. It's hard to teach your kids not to be like that because he presents himself as very successful, which he is. But at the same time, it's like, would you want your kids behaving like that? Like I wouldn't, so I'm not going to praise him in front of my students or my children. I wouldn't. I'm like, he's a good grappler, but that's where it ends. There are people that are just as good but behave. They're better role models, in my opinion.
Do you think you don't think he could put a gi on and kick some butt?
I think he'd be very good in the gi, but he's got to try. He hasn't done that, But I have no doubt. As gifted as he is, he's very gifted. There's no doubt about it.
Hey,
he could probably make it to the top in a few years if he gave it a shot.
Just talking about this, I've got a friend who's a really good practitioner, and he says he'll never get the next belt because he's just sick of the gi. So he just always goes to train in his rash guards. And I said, why don't you like the gi? And he's like, it's stupid. He goes, when do you ever walk around where I just watched a video of you on Instagram where you were demonstrating something, and this is why it popped in my head, and then you stood up and you did what we all do, you fix your belt and fix your jacket. And he goes, it's just dumb, like every 30 seconds everything falls apart and blah blah blah. Like, what's your comment on that as a lifelong?
I think people have different preferences. I respect. There's a minute that I like no gi more than gi. I've gone back and forth over the course of my life. It's weird because I have friends that only want to do one. I have students that only want to do one or the other. It's funny. A lot of people say that it's stupid because no one's going to be wearing a gi in the street. I'm like, no one's wearing rash guards and spats either. Like no one's going to be butt scooting. No one's playing shin to shin. No one's playing open guard. There's a lot of things people don't do on the streets when they fight, including 90% of what you specialize in. I think the argument is extra funny when it comes from the people that like submission only format, which is even further away from a real fight than a point system is because they don't care for position as you would in a real fight. Submission only is a terrible idea for self-defense, in my opinion. A submission is normally a bad idea in a real fight. That's one thing that people don't want to admit to. Like, unless you're in an environment that is like controlled, like, where a referee will stop the fight. If you're at a bar, you should never armbar someone. That's the dumbest thing you could do at a bar fight,
right.
For example. I want to be respectful of people that prefer no gi, but I think they're missing out. And they're harming themselves. And I'll tell you why. If you look at ADCC champions, the vast majority of them come from the gi. Like, you have to look at the number, but my guess, 80 to 90% of ADCC medalists have come from the IBJJF leagues in the gi. And it's not, I'm not even saying that, even if you don't believe me that the gi is helpful for no gi, a lot of people don't believe that argument, even though the facts speak otherwise. There's another argument that they should listen to, and I hope this convinces them. You'll get twice the experience. And experience is very important. A lot of the reason why a lot of the submission only crowd, they don't do well at ADCC, and they don't. If you watch them, I follow this very closely, Mike. They don't do well. They always lose. Even when they have a big name and they get invited because they have a big social media following, yada, 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 they don't do well. And the reason they're doing well is because they lack experience. Like, you can't, like, there's a reason why Khabib is 29-0. And it's because I guarantee you, if you dig through his record as a child, he has hundreds of wrestling and sambo matches. And you lose and you lose and you learn how to control your nerves, you master strategy. They call it fight IQ. Fight IQ is a skill. You're not born with it. You hone it, you prep it, you nurture it, you get better at it. It's a skill, you learn it. And I think competing is a skill. You get better the more you do it. You become more intelligent as a competitor. You become more intelligent about the rules and the decisions you make. And the people who are training the gi and no gi, they're getting twice the experience. So by the time they make it to ADCC, a guy who has 200 competitions under his belt in no gi will have 400 in the gi. And then you say, oh, it's the same. It's not the same, man. It's not the same. There's a reason why the vast majority of ADCC medalists have come from the gi, believe it or not. And you can look it up. Don't take my word. You can go down the list. It's overwhelmingly IBJJF competitors. And it's not a coincidence.
That's cool. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I like it. I just said this because Rob is his name. Rob, if you watch this,
I hope he doesn't get offended. I hate offending. I speak my mind.
No, he's a very educated, clear thinking man. He wouldn't push back. He's a big boy.
And it doesn't stop us from being friends, okay, Rob, or
Yeah.
anyone else listening. Like I'm gonna get 5 messages tomorrow from Bruce Lee fans, I guarantee you. I'm not trying to pick fights with people. We can still be friends if we disagree. Like I'm that kind of person. So please don't be offended if I've offended anyone today.
I think that it's okay to it's kind of comical. It's beyond comical to think that a guy like you're saying that really was a movie star. And I know there's like stories of his fights, but there's no data other than what we would wishful thinking
Yeah.
that people want to even entertain such stuff. It's dumb.
Yeah, I
Dumb.
think we have better. It's funny, and the example because like I dislike marketing in general. I'm a very meritocratic oriented person. You get what you earn, no more, no less. What you work for is what you deserve, right? In terms of your results. There's this guy in Brazil called Euclides Pereira. You probably never heard of him. Most people never heard of him. He retired undefeated from MMA in
Okay.
the pre-Royce Gracie era. Him and Ivan Gomez were the greatest MMA fighters in the world, arguably. They both retired undefeated, right? Possibly close to 100 fights, fighting for free for peanuts. Like these guys are doing it for the love of it. He's 90 something years old. He's 90 something years old. He's still alive and teaching, believe it or not. I mean, he just sits in a chair and tells people to do things. He can't really move around and teach, right? But he's still active. I interviewed him a few months ago. It'll be out in my new book coming out soon. It is crazy to me that a world that, in theory upholds or loves martial arts, a world that praises Bruce Lee over Euclides Pereira. I think that's a that's a messed up world, man. And I think
Mm.
this is my motivation for writing history books. I think this is insane. I think it's
It's kind of
insulting. It's insulting to
I
me.
never thought about this until right now. So there's a bunch of books back here from guys that were pioneers in the shooting sports. And I'm a martial artist and without guns. I've trained for years, but there are tons of dudes that came before the internet or before social media. Guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and guys that have been dead for 100 years that created what is now the modern shooting sports. And you got girls in bikinis that get paid by Colt or Smith and Wesson, and guys think that this chick or this guy, whoever it is, some sexy person created something, and it's like, man, this thing's attributed to this dude from 1920. And he was like this little dude from Oklahoma and nobody knows his name. Like, that's one of the reasons we started this podcast. I've interviewed dozens and dozens of these guys just so that there was something in the world of them speaking other than in person.
Yeah. I again like this is in every area I think there's that musician that's not acknowledged that is brilliant.
Mm.
And then you get, I don't know, I some famous pop star that's making millions and doing concerts all over the world that
Using
can't even play
auto
an instrument,
tune and yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
even know
yeah.
how to play an instrument. Like that drives me crazy. And what upsets me is that people applaud it because I kind of get it why someone there would do it. I don't like the reasons why they would do it, but I get it because there's a logic behind it. You make money, sure, okay, it's profitable, fine. But why people applaud that is like, no, I don't. I don't want to be. I'm not going to be part of your fan base. Like and then you're just one person, Rob. No one cares. I'm like, fine, but you ain't getting my vote.
Yeah.
Because I refuse to admire people that haven't paid the price. I deeply, deeply admire people who pay the price. I got accused a while ago during the kind of was sometimes I was arguing with someone like people. Someone sending me a message. You're jealous. That's why, because you're not rich and famous. So I'm like, I think I told you this on the phone. So it could be. Maybe I am jealous. Maybe I'm an envious, resentful, bitter individual, and I just hate the world. And I go around like,
that should be like if you were ever on a dating app, that should be your little bio.
yeah, I'm bitter. I hate the world. I'm jealous of people, and I wish I were, like
Oh
on TV
shit.
and rich and on, whatever. But then I go, man, like I can't be the case because every time I see someone more successful than myself in jiu-jitsu, for example, or MMA or whatever, and so long as they had paid their dues, I have nothing but admiration for them. Every time I see Marcus Buchecha or Roger Gracie walk past me, I'm like, that's the man right there, man. Holy cow. Like 13 world titles. And I'm happy for it. I'm happy. The guy's accomplished way more than me, and I'm happy for the guy. I'm not for it. Doesn't cross my mind to be. So I don't think that's true. I just can't stand people that haven't paid the price, and
Mm.
I call it a helicopter ride to the top of Mount Everest. They don't climb the mountain. They take a helicopter ride to the top, and they say, "I had the same view as you. We're equal." I'm like, "No, we're not." If you climb it on the strength of your own legs and you get up there on a helicopter ride, it's not the same view, and it doesn't have the same value. It's, oh, but it's the same view. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. But the crowd, the majority, the Instagram, they think it is because they vote and say, "You're good, man. Look how you're rich and famous and popular. So therefore, you must be great." Famous for
Mm.
what? Famous for what? What did you do? Show me. Show me what you did. What? Manipulate algorithms and people and become a good politician, playing the game well? That's not an accomplishment. It means you're corrupt. That's all it means. It doesn't say a thing about who you are. It doesn't say a thing about your character. It doesn't say a thing about your inner strength. It doesn't say anything about you as a human. Why are we applauding it? I don't understand people who applaud these people, these celebrities, these goofy fucking idiots. Like, why are so many great people for us to applaud and admire in this world? Some brilliant scientists, doctors, teachers, athletes, like brilliant people, full of credit, man, full of merit. And we choose to idolize morons. It makes no. I'll never understand it. I'll never understand that, Mike.
There was a reason that our founders respect learned men and only allowed the learned men to lead too, because they knew that men left to their own devices oftentimes
I
chose,
can't
as my friend
remember.
Z says, the path of least resistance.
I was reading a book on the American Revolution a while ago, and I can't remember if it was James Madison. I have it. I might be able to find and send you the quote, and I can't remember the exact words. But these guys are wrestling with the idea of democracy and liberalism and all that, and I think it was James Madison. I can't remember this for sure, but he says something to the tune of the quality of the American Constitution is directly attached to the virtue of the American people. Meaning, this thing is not going to work unless we educate people. You have to be learned, you have to be educated, you have to stand for something, you have to have values. Freedom is a great idea, but it comes with a great deal of responsibility. And I think that if you don't educate people, it can be detrimental in some ways. I think they gotta walk hand in hand. Freedom and education. I think they go together. Yeah. They don't. I don't. I don't think freedom without education is. I mean, I'm saying there's a better alternative, but I don't think it's a good thing.
And education by itself, without the freedom to use it, is
Perfect,
meaningless.
perfect,
Yeah,
perfect. It's a.
yeah.
And I think the founding fathers were more or less like other thinkers of the Enlightenment. You see, they wrestle with this idea of like freedom, but like without like people have to be educated. We have to have values here. Like you can't just
Civic
say,
virtue. It was
yes,
this idea
civic
of
virtue.
civic virtue.
Exactly. Don't you just do whatever you want and expect people to behave, like good citizens. You have to. When I say education, again, I go back to to economy, physical, intellectual, and moral. I think these things go together. That's what a healthy citizen ought to look like. And I think that part we lost. We got the freedom part for sure, but the other part, I don't think it's walking hand in hand with freedom.
I would love to be in a place where we expected our neighbor to look out for our kid, not because we're not doing it, but like if I saw your kid in the street get about to get hit by a car, or maybe that's a little bit out there, maybe doing something. I'm not talking about corporal punishment, but like when I was a kid, all the parents looked out for the other kids, and I think we've created a world with the litigious society we have with filming everybody. If you don't like it, I just film you and put you on the internet. People just like said, I'm not gonna get involved. I'm not gonna bother with anything. I think
Yeah.
we got to care enough to say I don't give a shit what you do.
You
Like
know
this
why?
is right.
You know why they film? Because they value the views and followers they're going to get more than the health and integrity of their friends. That's why they
Hmm.
film, because we have taught them that followers is more important than defending your friends and standing by them or preventing people from hurting themselves. Because we
Hmm.
place like, oh, that the following is such an important thing. So anyone who's filming, clearly they're saying me getting followers is more important than the health of and well-being of my friends. Like it just gives you like idea of where the bar is. Like what is it that people are upholding as valuable? I think it's disappointing, man. And I'll go back to martial arts. Martial arts teaches you different things, man. Like you just got to pay attention. The lessons are all there on the mat. You just got to speak them out loud and make ourselves heard as instructors. But I feel like we're losing the war to these promoters and these hustlers that just want to make a quick dollar from jiu-jitsu at any cost. They don't give two shits what happens to the sport, because as soon as it's not profitable, they're going to go somewhere else. They don't
I got a
care.
good question for you. So my coach Dan, Henry Akins, I have people I travel all over the country, and Dan will tell you I'm an ambassador of jujitsu. I've got lots of people to start training over the years. Hey, you're fat, you're stupid. The gun's not
Yeah.
the only thing to save you. Get in the gym. And people say, well, where do I go? Right. So I will usually call somebody I know and I say, like, what affiliate is around this guy? How does somebody deduce when they're going, if I don't know anything, if I have no body of knowledge on the sport, how do I know? I walk in, there's a beautiful building, there's a nice shiny mat. What questions did they ask to help draw out that truth? Do you know? Is there a way to even
It's
quantify
not
that?
being taught, man. We're not. I think this is what happens. Parents, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, and then Joe Rogan says, "Put your kids in jujitsu." They send their kids jujitsu because that's what everyone else is doing. If Keanu Reeves is training, then probably is good for my kids too, kind of thing. And they send them over there. They don't understand what's happening, and martial arts have a reputation for teaching your children these values as an educational practice. You teach them respect, you teach them hierarchy, and these things. The mats teach these things, but it's not just the mats. You see, like, you also have the culture. We go back to the culture, like what we talk about when you're having a conversation. For example, when I'm talking to my brown belts, I notice all the teenagers come by and they start listening to me, and they don't ask questions. They just like stand by and they start listening. And if we're talking about fights, sometimes they'll talk about fights and like, oh man, that was a beautiful KO, and like you see the press conference and all the the trash they were talking. And I'm always paying attention to these things, because when a 13-year-old sees a brown belt talk like that, what he's doing is like he's basically telling that child that is what very important. This guy is awesome because of this. And I try to change that culture in the gym. I go, no, that's not why he's great. Like, he's got a good left hook and a good double leg, but what he said that it wasn't right. He shouldn't have said that. And I try to do these things here and there, but it's an uphill battle, man, because I don't think it's jiu-jitsu doesn't have that. Like judo has that. Like jiu-jitsu doesn't have that. It's the do in judo. Like we've never had that. And I've made like
Talk about the
talk
dough a little bit. I know what you're saying. Share with the
the do
folks
is
listening what you mean.
the word, the letter, the kanji Jew and Jew are the same. From jiu-jitsu and judo, it's the do that's different, right? So they changed it from art to way. So it's the gentle way. And the reason I changed it to do is because I wanted to make it more of a philosophy of life. You wanted to make it a school for life. He was talking about these values that we're talking. It's just not about the skills themselves, but also educating children. And that's what Brazilian Jiu Jitsu doesn't have. Like, what we have is an awesome martial art. It's got amazing lifestyle and very friendly gym culture, but the culture is not written down. It's not canonized. So as a result, it's subjected to change. And in the 27 years I've been doing jiu-jitsu, I've seen it change way too much. It's constantly changing. And people don't see it because they're brand new to the sport. But anyone's been doing this for 15, 20 years will agree with me. It's changed dramatically. You can ask Dan, he'll tell you he's been doing it that long. It's like it's changed dramatically. And the issue is it's the culture now is being shaped by Instagram, which is not. I don't think Jigoro Kano would have been impressed with Instagram, put it like that. I think that we need to cement on what it is that we stand for, what the purpose of jiu-jitsu is, what it is that we're teaching and why we're teaching it, and have that written down, codified, so there's no hustler in the future that's going to say this is what jiu-jitsu is and try to change it. Jigoro Kano was smart enough to do that for judo. It hasn't been done for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think it should be done, because it will continue to change to the tunes of the customer and the changing winds, the political winds. It goes left one way, right the other. It's like it's an empty bag in the air, and the wind is just blowing it in random directions. That's jiu-jitsu right now. Ain't no one in
Hmm.
control. There's no order to it. There's no purpose. You ask these guys what's the purpose of it, they can't even agree. They don't even agree on what they're doing. They don't even agree on what they're doing. They're just like, it's a very individualistic practice. Like, so I think this is detrimental. It suggests that the art will continue to change, and I don't see it changing in a good direction. I think that this professional crowd will. I don't know if it's going to take off or not, but I think it's detrimental to the future of jiu-jitsu. I never understood this thing between amateur and professional sports until I got into the history of jiu-jitsu and I started seeing things differently. That's what it's for. It's sure it's beneficial to the athlete, but not to the overall culture and the community as a whole. I think it does more harm than good. You know?
I think, like all things, Dan likes to say, not all jujitsu is created equal. Of course, that's everything. Not all restaurants, not all car manufacturers, etc. I've traveled around and I've stepped into, oh, I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 gyms in the last 10 years on the road. I'll call, hey, you know this guy? You mind if I drop into the open mat or drop into class? From Alaska to Florida to Arizona to New Jersey, I've walked into gyms. And there's some places where you're like, whoa, these dudes are badasses. Like, this is some cool dudes. If I lived here, I'd come train here. And then there's places, go in there and you're like, what the hell are these people even doing? I was at one as a blue belt. I laid on the mat for an open mat and just like they lined up on the wall and came out and took turns with me. And so later we're cleaning up, and I mean it was like effortless for me. The guy's like, "Man, how long you been training? And what do you do?" And I've trained long enough, way longer than most blue belts, but took huge breaks. And I realized some of these guys had been like training for a long time, brown and black belts, and they sucked. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
What is it that you're actually practicing? Like, is it purely that you punched the clock enough times coming to class that you
yeah.
were awarded this belt? And of course, it doesn't always go that way, right? I've been in gyms where they've got white and blue belts that are uh, super focused on drilling technique, and they got some damn good skills. They don't have the whole game, but like you get some young kid that's got like a badass arm bar or takedown, and gets hard to deal with them because they're training.
Yeah, and I mean that's the way you're supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard, man. Like I don't want it to be. And I mean, and I'm being a hypocrite here too because I've conceded a lot, man. I like
Like
to
what? What have you conceded?
I like to pretend I'm this tough guy who has not conceded at all to the changes of jiu-jitsu, but I'm part of the problem. I'm not the solution. I'm not part of the solution, man. I had to concede, man. I got rent coming my way. I got bills to pay. I have no retirement, so you have to concede. You got to cater to the client. Now, granted, this is something everyone does. It's not like I'm the only person. It's like it's the norm. Like I'll give an example. Courage. Courage is part of what we do. You got to be brave. We're teaching that. Courage to do the right thing. Courage to fight the bigger guy. Courage to stand by. Like, hey man, like it's just having the balls to master your fears. Like try at least. My student comes along and says, like, I don't want to train with that guy because he's 15 pounds heavier. What do I do? Now you can say you got to go. I'm not going to give you a choice. He might go, but you just lost some points with that guy. He's not going to go, oh, coach just doing the right thing. Whereas, they don't want to train. They're going to say, what am I going to do? I'm the paying customer. He's a paying customer. I got to concede. I got, okay, buddy. So now when I pair my students up, bro, I have to remember who doesn't want to train with who. Two girls get into an argument. They don't want to train with each other anymore. I got to remember that. It's crazy to me. Like, well, I don't care,
Cle
you guys.
cle Clearly, there is some value in the new fragile white belt and the one crazy guy that can get out of control and hurt people.
Fair,
And I'm not saying
fair.
that to
Yeah.
give you that edification,
No,
but
no,
just
I'm with
people
you.
listening. I want to make
Yeah.
sure that they understand that you're not just like,
Yeah.
70-pound, 17-year-old girl in the 190-pound monster iron worker that's, gonna crush her and
No.
doesn't care. But I mean that's coaching though, right? Helping that person move to the next
I
space.
I'm with you. So thank you for making that point, Mike, because you're right. I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I don't believe people should get injured. Like I keep the animals with the animals. I'm not an unreasonable person. But what happens a lot of times, you have these little hierarchies that people create. Like I'm
Mm.
better than you. And they don't want to put that to the test. They're scared they're worried about prestige. That's what they're worried about. They're worried about losing to someone they're supposed to be in theory. And I'm one of the few gyms. I hear this, I don't know this from experience. I know this because people tell me this all the time. They go, Rob, you're the only gym I've ever been to where you don't let me choose. You don't let people choose their training partners. I'm like, other people do that? I'm like, yeah, everyone lets you choose their training partners. I'm like, this is strange to me. Apparently, I'm one of the few people who does. It's the only person
So
that's. I don't let them choose.
just to be clear, so I'm in your class, and now it gets time to spar or drill. You go Mick, you go with Bob, Tom, you go with Tim. Okay, all right. I didn't
Yes.
know that. Okay, that's cool.
I do that because I know that if Joe gives John a tough round and they don't want to lose to one another, they're not going to want to train with each other. They might want to train with Tom because there's a silent agreement between John and Tom that Tom beats John, but just by a little bit. So John's okay with that. There's like a silent agreement between the two. So they don't really push the boundaries. The hierarchy is established and they're okay with it. They don't want to mess with it. And I'm trying to mess with that hierarchy every day. I'm trying to throw that hierarchy, like, let's find out who the best guy on the mats is, because that's how you get better, because you have to push yourself. So I pair people up according to who's going to challenge them, right? So I don't put the 17-year-old girl with the iron worker. I don't put I put the animals with the animals, the older men with the older men, the women with the women, the kids with the kids. I'm not, I know how to do this. But you'd be surprised, man. Even like high level competitors, they run from training partners. People do this all the time,
I'd be
and
lying. I'd be lying if I said there's certain times of guys at the gym that I know is either going to beat my ass or make me have to work my butt off, and I'm tired or I'm sore, and it's just like, I'll catch him tomorrow. Like I'd be
no,
lying if
listen, man. Like, how old are you?
47.
47. Okay. I do not hold a 47-year-old the same standard I hold a 22-year-old who talks about being a champion nonstop. I have no, I mean, it sounds like I'm talking to hobbyists, but my beef is not with hobbyists, for the record. I love hobbyists. They're my favorite students.
I'm not a hobbyist, okay?
I'll tell you what my beef is, Mike. My beef is with the people that talk about being a champion and spend their days on Instagram promoting their brand, blah, 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 blah. It comes time to show it. They don't show it, man. Like, hey, man, you got to
Mm.
be the person you're acting like you are. You show me, okay? Because I'm not convinced. And they're in their comfort zone. People find their comfort zone. My job as a coach is to pull you out of your comfort zone, which puts me at odds with people, because
Who
people
are
don't.
some of the guys that you've trained that people would know their name?
Well, I have a student from white to black. She's my ex-wife, actually. She's statistically the second most successful jiu-jitsu competitor of all time, statistically,
Oh,
because total number of tournaments won. Her name is Michelle Nicolini, a trainer from white to black. She has more tournaments than Bushish and Roger. It's her total amount, right? More like high
wow.
level events. She's the second most accomplished in history, far more accomplished than me. I've trained other jiu-jitsu players that have trained with me for a brief time, not, I wouldn't call myself their coach, but they train with me. Felipe Andrew, he was ranked number one in the world. He trained with me for a couple of years. Renato Canuto, who's a former IBJJF world champion. I've had I have a lot of like masters champions, other, high level jiu-jitsu competitors that train with me for short periods of time. Um, UFC, I've trained a lot of like when I was in MMA for most of my stay in Vegas. I was really more in MMA than jiu-jitsu. Trained total of 6 UFC champions. Trained Randy, trained Vitor Belfort, trained Vanderlei, trained Forrest Griffin, Frank Mir, Joanna. I coached Anthony Pettis for one of his fights. Like I've worked with a lot of these high profile guys over the years. And and this is what I noticed they all have in common, man. This is my
That
what I
was what I was
try to
going to ask you, if there was a
it's they know
commonality.
there's a common denominator, man. There's a common thread. And people, and I say this to my students, and they kind of agree with me, but they don't internalize it because it's not what they want to hear. What they have in common has nothing to do with technique. It has nothing to do with style. It has nothing to do with, they have a game, or some people believe you have to be good at leg locks to be good at jiu-jitsu. You have to be good at burying bolos. It's like, man, you can pick whatever set of techniques you want. It's not going to matter. That's not the common denominator. The common denominator are their values, belief and values, those two things. They believe in themselves in all the right ways, not in the superficial way. Not that, I'm going to pose for a picture here and act tough and then, break every time things get hard. Like, you believe in yourself and you uphold good values. You have accountability. You blame yourself when you lose. You're humble. Dude, I remember like guys like high level guys. Man. I remember like Dominic Cruz was like my gym once. I'm a fan. I love Dominic Cruz. He's asking me questions. I'm like, man, that's so cool, man. I got Dominic Cruz asking me questions. And or sometimes you get these blue belts, purple belts, and they act like they know more than me. And I'm like, they're never going anywhere, man. You've lost your humility. And I say this a lot, like the loss of humility is the end of learning. Once you lose that, you're done. And people lose their they get like this much of like a little bit of fame, this much, and their humility is out the window. And I already know it's the beginning of the end. Because you get guys like GSP who are great, and they say it. They're never done learning. They consider themselves white belts. I'm like, good, yes, that's the way you should. That's how a martial artist should think. Never done learning. So that's how they are. They have accountability. They're humble. They're disciplined. They show up. They do what they hate. They're coachable. They listen to their coaches. They don't think they know more than coach. They think they're learn. They see themselves as beginners. They don't think they train hard enough. They they uh they have courage. They compete. They throw themselves in a fire. Like that's what they all have in common. Sure, there's a genetic factor there. Let's not neglect that. Like there's the genetic component is very, very underrated in my opinion. And it's
Z
probably
calls that attributes.
who calls that?
My buddy Z that I was talking
Yeah.
about, the black belt under your banner,
Yeah.
he calls them attributes.
Sure. Yeah. Like and it's genetic. It's you're born with it. Okay. Like it's not. We're not going to pretend here. Me and you are half the athlete that John Jones is. Like we both know we're not. Like
You haven't seen me shirtless, bro. Don't fucking assume shit.
Man, I've done. I remember one time I did. Before I let you go, man, because I got to get going too.
Yeah.
I remember I did strength and conditioning once with Ronaldo Souza, Jacare. He was living with me before I fought him at AGC. He was actually living with me. He lived
The
with me for
one
about
that's
2
now
months.
teaching out of Florida.
Correct. All right.
Yeah,
So
one of my guys is at his gym. Mm-hmm.
So he lived with me for 2 months. We were training every day, became good friends. He actually ended up fighting him at ADCC right after, but good guy. And I remember doing straight to condition. Maybe Jack Ray remember this or not. He doesn't remember the second part of the story. He definitely remembers the first part. And we're doing strength and conditioning, man. He's like, the guy didn't even know what creatine was. He didn't know how to squat. Like, he had never done any of that. And he's a much better athlete than me. Like, everything he do, he jumps higher, he runs faster, he recovers faster. And I just felt humiliated in the weight room with him because he was better than me at everything. And I remember getting in the car that day, man. I was like, I'd hold it back to tears. I was so angry. I was so angry because it's like, I can't match the guy. He's just a better athlete. And it counts. I mean, he's more successful than I am. I'm not surprised, like he's a better, it counts. It's important. I'm not saying I'm a terrible athlete either, but
Who
like
won?
some people just are
Who
phenomenal.
won the match between you?
He won. He won on points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he didn't dominate you.
No, it was a technical. It was like it was a guard pull. Like I ADCC rules, you could pull guard after 3 seconds after a failed shot. So I shot in, and I don't remember if I counted wrong in my head or if I forgot about the rule. To this day I can't remember. I know I messed up. That's all I know. So I pulled guard and he scored 2 that way. So that's how I lost. It was like a dumb technicality on my part. It wasn't a great match, to be honest. Yeah, man, but it counts, man. The genetic factor is like, you look at a guy like John Jones and you just like, yeah, man, like
Machine.
he's gifted, man. I'm not saying he doesn't work hard. He doesn't have. I'm not. When I say that, it sounds like I'm trying to take merit or credit from him. That's not what I'm doing. I just think that some people are born with a little extra something, and
Got some bits and pieces that everybody doesn't.
Sports are not fair. Yeah.
I know that you have to go. I appreciate you taking the time to talk. If the people listening never meet you, never cross your path, never see you again, what would you leave them with?
First off, I hope I didn't offend anyone, and I try not to. I like to speak my mind because I hope people speak their minds with me. I believe that establishes an honest relationship. An honest relationship starts with people not holding their cards to their chest, and I hope to have more friends that speak their minds with me, and I hope that even if that offends me, I'd still rather that than them holding back. And I believe in sincere relationships. So, but if I did offend, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. Certainly not, my intention is not to offend. It's to be truthful to the best of my ability. Read my books. I'm not trying to sell a book, but I think if you like jiu-jitsu history, I think you'll learn more about the art we practice if you read them carefully. Stop by the gym, say hello.
And where are you at?
I'm in Las Vegas. I own a gym in Las Vegas. I teach 6 days a week, every day, morning and evening.
Very cool. I appreciate you. And how do people find you online?
Since
we know you love Instagram.
I hate it, but I'm on it. I'm a hypocrite. So I mean, I've thought about deleting it. I can't delete it. My business. I thought about delegating it to people, but like I get private messages all the time, so I end up keeping it, right? But
Understood.
it's Robert Drysdale JJ. Robert Drysdale JJ. That's my Instagram name.
We'll throw a
Yeah.
link up.
And then yeah, if other than that, stop by the gym, and if I ever meet me in person, come say hi. I'm always trying to make new friends. I tell people this all the time. Like, Rob, you wrote these books and you picked a bunch of fights and you probably closed some doors. I'm like, yeah, definitely closed some doors. And I'm like, I made a lot of friends, and that's my treasure. I met people that are absolutely incredible through these books. People I have a lot in common with, and to me, that is the biggest takeaway from everything. From the beginning to now has been the friends that I've made over the years, and these are friends that I've craved and wanted my entire life, and I never had them until recently. So I'm very thankful for the new friends that I have, thanks to these books.
Awesome. I dig that. You guys that tuned in, I hope that you heard something that spurred some interest or got you to think. I think that was a big part of the discussion, thinking and cutting things apart and actually looking at them, not just maybe taking everything at face value. That's a part of being a good adult. As always, be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them and walk the higher line. Peace. Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carrytrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.